Okay. Okay, everyone. Welcome to the December 2nd meeting of the Hunting and Advanced Technology Working Group. To go over the objectives for this session tonight, we're gonna get a update on the comments that have been received via the online feedback form, and continue to provide an opportunity for you to get to know each other online. We'll get presentations on fair chase ethic and provide an opportunity for you to discuss what you've heard as well as ask questions about the presentations. We have 3 presenters this evening. And then we'll get a chance to discuss some initial reactions to what you've heard and then talk about next steps for moving forward. Just a reminder of the ground rules that we've agreed to play with. Participate with intention means pay attention to what part of the agenda we're in. Hold questions to the extent that you're able to until the Q&A portion of the meeting so that we can get through the presentations. We haven't given a generous amount of time to our presenters, so we want to make sure they have a chance to get through the material they're planning on presenting. And recognizing that you were convened to include a diversity of perspectives, and we hope that you appreciate that diversity of perspectives. That's what makes groups smarter than individuals. So demonstrate your appreciation for people that may not see the world the same way you do, and do everything we can to maintain a respectful space. So, oops, we're not ready for that yet. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ellery.
Perfect. So let me share my screen here real quick. Are y'all seeing my the summary document?
We are.
Perfect. So since our last meeting, as of 11/18/2024 at 12 p.m., we received 221 comments from the public through the feedback form on the website. 118 of those comments were Idaho residents, 3 were out of state, 1 from Oregon, Washington, and California.
Ellery, there is a little box that says meeting summary. Are you seeing that?
Little box, this is meeting summary.
Oh, maybe it was on my screen. I turned it off.
Okay. So essentially, since that time, any comments that have come in since 11/18 at 12 p.m., those will be summarized in the next iteration of comments. Since then, we have received about 40 additional comments from the public. There you have a graphic that basically summarizes in visual form just the gist of what we've been hearing about from the public thus far. The largest number of comments were generally a broad statement of support for hunting technology and less restrictions on hunters. However, it is definitely worth noting that commenters were opposed to advanced technologies often gave more direct responses that included caveats or oppositions of specific technologies. So there's even more of a split between opposition and support for technologies in general. And obviously hunters' support or opposition varied widely. So the main topics that were brought up time and time again in those comments were long-range shooting and optics, thermal/infrared and night vision, drones, trail cameras, live feed and location sharings, motorized vehicles and e-bikes. And then similar to last time, we had a lot of comments that were not germane to the HAT working group, including season setting rules, adjustment of length and timing, antler point restrictions. 33 comments are couched into that. Tag sales, including limiting the number of tags within a specific unit or non-resident hunting is a good chunk there. Good chunk about wolf management, and then some comments about concerns about the structure of the working group membership or selection process. So I'm not going to go into great detail on any of these main topics. Y'all can read that on your own. That was what it's provided for. But all to say that the public is equally concerned, or let me rephrase. The public is participating very well in this process and having their thoughts, pros and cons expressed. And it's showing up well in our public feedback forms. So if anyone has any specific questions or comments related to what was provided, I'm happy to answer those. But yeah, I think for the sake of brevity, you know, I've got a lot to go through. I won't go through and read the summary out loud for everyone, but you can read it on your own. Any questions or thoughts for me?
Okay. Well, we are ahead of schedule, which is absolutely great with me. But with that, Ellery, would you like to introduce our presenters?
Sure, happy to. First up, we have Kyle Lear, who is the director of Big Game Records for the Boone and Crockett Club. Kyle, if you want to take it away, it is all yours, sir.
All right, first up to bat. Yeah, my name's Kyle Lear, director of Big Game Records for the Boone and Crockett Club. I just want to thank you guys for having me and give a brief talk on fair chase ethics, hunting ethics. So without further ado, let me get into presentation. Okay, so little shot of our headquarters there in Missoula, Montana, the Milwaukee Railroad Station. Who is the Boone and Crockett Club? I imagine most people on here probably know, but thought it'd be a good idea to at least let people know who we are. We were established in 1887 by Theodore Roosevelt and George Bird Grinnell. Grinnell basically came up with most of the ideals. However, he needed someone that was good at speaking and could get people on board with his ideas, and so he found that in Theodore Roosevelt. We were the first organization to tackle conservation on a national scope, address the slaughter of big game animals across the North American continent, and promote ethical hunting. Boone and Crockett Club's history is that of America's wildlife conservation movement, and we created a method of hunting sportsmanship known as fair chase. Okay. So I picked a field photo of a hunter from Idaho that we had so that's an Idaho picture right there. But I thought it'd be good to provide our mission statement as well. It's the mission of the Boone and Crockett Club to promote conservation and management of wildlife, especially big game and its habitat, to preserve and encourage hunting and to maintain the highest ethical standards of fair chase and sportsmanship in North America. So with that brief introduction, hunt fair chase. What is fair chase? So fair chase is defined by Boone and Crockett Club as the ethical, sportsmanlike, and lawful pursuit and taking of any free-ranging wild game animal in a manner that does not give the hunter an improper or unfair advantage over the game animals. The earliest recorded usage of fair chase is found in our 5th article of our Constitution, which was adopted in 1888. So how hunting was being conducted and the ethics of the hunter would determine if hunting was allowed to continue. And I feel that this remains just as relevant today as it did in the 1800s. How we conduct ourselves in the field will determine if hunting is allowed to continue. Fair chase became a part of the overall conservation ethic, outlined acceptable behavior, and aspired the hunter to something bigger than themselves. Fair chase originally contained 4 methods that we adopted in 1888. As you know, not killing an animal while swimming, in a trap, spotlighting, or immobilized in deep snow. We've since broadened our fair chase to include technology, motorized equipment, and not in compliance with the governing bodies, game laws, and regulations. The last one, the game laws and regulations, was added is because at the time that we came up with fair chase, there were no game laws or regulations, so they had to be created. I was going to touch on two things tonight, one being long range shooting and the other one technology. Sounds like that's a pretty hot topic based on what I saw from the summary here. So Boone and Crockett Club's stance on long range shooting is we recognize that advances in technology has given the potential of taking longer shots at wild game. We encourage that the hunter stretch the stalk instead of the shot and to stay within the hunter's effective killing range, whatever that is for them. But we always do encourage that the hunter attempt to stretch the stalk instead of taking a shot that might be outside of their effective killing range. We also know that effective killing range is unique to each individual, based on their training, experiences, what they're used to. Here in the West, we tend to have more potential for longer range shots than perhaps back east. And we urge all hunters to carefully consider all the outcomes, before they pull that trigger or the strings released on an animal. So that's where we stand there. The technology and hunting aspect, that's a trail cam photo from our ranch. Is actually a couple years ago, instead of trying to essentially chase every emerging technology out there, and as we all know, it's changing, faster than we can blink. The club came up with kind of a comprehensive statement on hunting and technology, and it just basically it says the use of any technology that delivers real-time location data, so including photos, to target or guide a hunter to any species or animal in a manner that elicits an immediate or real-time response by the hunter is not permitted. So the technology that covers anything from trail cameras to drones to walkie-talkies to text. It's basically saying that you transmit any data in real time and the hunter reacts in real time or an immediate response is not eligible for entry. And then again, kind of short and sweet, but I wanted my last slide to hang up here, just to reiterate that it's up to every hunter to take into consideration fair chase and use it as a tool to form the foundations, for their ethical conduct in the field. And always keep in mind that does what I'm doing provide an improper, unfair advantage against the animal I'm pursuing? Kind of the two things that the club, tries to impress upon the hunter. That's all I had.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Kyle. Much appreciated. We'll be ahead of schedule. I'll let Wendy take her with the timeline a little bit. But if you want to stop sharing your screen, we will turn it over to Justin Spring, who is the executive director of the Pope and Young Club.
All right. First off, thank you for everybody for letting us be here. A little history about myself. I'm the executive director of Pope and Young. I spent 15 years with Boone and Crockett and worked with Kyle a lot of that time. He actually stepped into my position, and so I was a little bit advantaged to kind of know what he'd be saying after spending that time with him. So my presentation is going to kind of take off where Kyle left off on this fair chase. And I'm going to use a little bit of data to drive home. I also am the deputy director of the ethics committee for Boone and Crockett, so still involved in those conversations as well. Let me get my presentation up here. All right, so similar to Boone and Crockett, Kyle kind of outlined the basics. Pope and Young was founded under the same format as Boone and Crockett Club. In 1961, archery hunting was allowed in a few states, but not uniformly recognized as a valid method of harvest. At that point, our founding member, Glenn St. Charles, went to the Boone and Crockett Club and said, "Hey, you guys have a good records program. I really appreciate what you guys are standing for. Would you allow me to start an organization with similar scope and reach for archery as Boone and Crockett has for the general sportsman?" Um, with that, we were granted permission. We created a corresponding records program of archery taken animals from 1961 till today. What this data gives us is a resource to note trends and patterns in archery from its adoption through its normalization to today's form. And in terms of technology, I think this is very relevant because we can see the effects of technology in a lot shorter window, I guess, than if you're looking at, rifle taken trophy since 1887. In terms of the Boone and Crockett's fair chase standards, Pope and Young stands in lockstep with them. We believe in the ethics. You'll see that come through a little bit in what I'm going to talk about here. But as Kyle stated, they did come up with that idea. That is Boone and Crockett territory. But just so the committee is aware, we do stand in concert with them on this and do believe strongly in its support by the hunting community. And again, this is an archery centric presentation, but that's our data and experience. So hopefully some of these trends that I can show you as we work through here, you guys can extrapolate to see what these potential effects could be beyond just archery seasons. Because when I went through and reviewed this, it really looks like we shouldn't be archery hunting when you look at all the negatives I'm going to show you, which obviously is not the case that we feel we're in. Some basic assumptions from Pope and Young's, mission, I guess, that I want to put out ahead of time. First and foremost is maintaining the ideas of the North American model of wildlife management. These should be our guiding principles, including ensuring hunter opportunity for all. Another strong point with Pope and Young: loss of license revenue is not an appropriate path to pursue. 50% Idaho fishing game comes from license and permits, 48% as of FY21. Ensuring hunter opportunity is required to accomplish recruitment of hunters to replace those aging out to maintain wildlife management funding. That again ties to the North American model. We feel allowing technology to expand at any rate supported by the market will lead to a loss of public support and opportunity to the average hunter. And finally, all user groups' desires should be considered and honored unless its adoption unnecessarily burdens another user group. First thing I'm going to go over here is isolating only what increasing harvest effects have. And obviously this isn't an exact, example. Sustainable harvest is generally higher than 10%, but for ease of numbers, what I've done here is created a hypothetical herd of 100 animals. And let's say 10 animals can be taken out of that 100 per season. We've got 100 people wanting to hunt those animals. So if we have a success rate of 10%, it's going to take you on average, you're going to kill one bull every 10 years. You're going to draw a tag every year, and all 100 people get to hunt. If we take that success rate from 10% to 20%, you're still going to, everything being the same, still herd size, still sustainable harvest and number of hunters. It's still going to kill you one bull every 10 years, but you're going to have to wait a year. You're going to draw a tag every other year. We take that to 30%, same thing. You're going to kill a bull once every 10 years. You're going to wait 3.5 years on average to get your tag. So you can see what this does. At 50%, you're still killing one bull every 10 years, but you only get to go hunting twice. You take that to 100% success, you still kill one bull every 10 years. There's only 10 available. 100 people want to hunt, but you only get to go hunting one time. So I put this in here to kind of explain, we do think that increasing harvest success does have a negative effect on recruitment, on hunter enjoyment, all these things. And so I like to use this example to kind of start why these harvest rates have an effect on anything. Another basic thing to touch on, sensors wildlife used to detect hunters, predators, smell, sight, sound. This technology is constantly developing to outcompete wildlife's ability to detect hunters. And this is happening at a far higher rate than they can adapt. Successfully reducing wildlife's ability to detect hunters ultimately leads to a higher success rate. This isn't a hypothetical. If they can't see you, hear you, or smell you, they're not going to be able to detect you, and so you're going to be able to harvest that animal easier. And that's what a lot of this technology, if we really break it down, is trying to do. cellular trail cameras, you're reducing the amount of smell there. The electronic optics, high-end optics, you're spotting them further than they can see you. Different sound devices. And so most of this technology, if you really boil it down, is trying to overcome a deer's ability to detect you. And if it is successful, ultimately that will increase success rates. And as I showed in my previous example, reduce the amount of hunting a person gets to do. One of our previous conservation directors was an Idaho Fish and Game employee, worked his way up through the ranks, Mike Schlegel. He still consults for Idaho. From 1975 until 2023, Mike has been compiling Idaho elk bow hunting data. And so what I've done here is kind of take a selection of the data that he forwarded me for this project to kind of show some of the changes that have happened over the time. So if you look on the left side, we start in 1975, we're in 5-year increments. You'll notice that I used 2001. He didn't have complete data for 2000, but this kind of gives you an idea of the changing and what's happened in Idaho elk hunting over that time period. You can see that 75, you started with 3,100 hunters. There was 100 elk killed. There was a 3% success. That was 1% of the overall general harvest. We get into 2021 or 2001, we've jumped up to 15,000 archery hunters, 2,100 elk harvested, a 14% success. And then, again, that is 21% of the general harvest. We go to 2023, we've now got 27,000 archery hunters, 3,700 elk harvested, a 13% success. You'll also note the days hunted it is increasing, but the days to harvest is decreasing. And so this is suggesting that archery is getting easier. If you look here, we've graphed Mike's statistics. The blue line is your percent success. The orange line is harvest per 100 hunters, just to kind of standardize our range. And then the green line is the percent of the general harvest. So you can see all these things are increasing with archery. Technology isn't the only explanation for this trend, but arguing it has no effect is unrealistic. Increasing archers could drive up harvest numbers and percent of total harvest, but if anything, should decrease the success rates, which we're not seeing. Increasing elk population could drive success and harvest numbers up, but shouldn't affect the percent of total harvest, which we can see that also is not the case. And then finally, technological advances making archery more effective and accessible could account for the shifts being witnessed in Idaho. So on the right here, to kind of show the technology advancements or start talking about that, we have a bear archery catalog from 1975. That's their new compound bow. You've got a quote there from Fred Bear himself. Being able to hold on your game and shoot a much faster arrow with a flatter trajectory are the major advantages of the compound bow for hunting. So then if we look on the right side of the screen here, you got the 2024 Bear flagship bow. So this kind of exemplifies in just the vertical bow the technological advances we've seen over that time period. This previous slide shows some significant changes to harvest success and rates over a relatively long period. While the data presented seems to make a logical cause and effect statement regarding advancing technologies in harvest, is there a major technological advance that has taken place over a shorter period, a single turning point? For that, we will go to the legalization of crossbows in Wisconsin. Now, before we get into that, though, technology, I want to reiterate, it's not inherently bad, nor does it have no place in hunting. There's some major positives. It's spread hunters out on available land. It's made unattainable hunts more feasible to the DIY hunter. Those same technologies, sat phones, inReach, all that has made outdoor recreation exponentially safer. It's increased our ability to manage populations because hunters can be more effective with lessened technologies that's seen in, certain predator hunts and tactics that are allowed that generally wouldn't be considered fair chase in a time that we need to reduce the population for a management objective. This technology has allowed us to do that, and it also has removed barriers to entry to get folks into it. E-scouting, a lot of this stuff that used to be terrifying, you can now get it, the click of a mouse. So, allows the hunters to better analyze the herds they're hunting and give them the ability to target their harvest, reduce potential wounding loss with the increasing, long range shooting. that the technology with those rifles and scopes does allow the experienced hunter to deliver a bullet very precisely, and reduces, that human error. But at the same time, well, it's spread out hunters. People would argue it removed public sanctuaries. There's no public land for these animals to get away from hunters. This technology artificially inflates hunters' perceived skill. When the box says 1,400 yards out of the box, but you realistically think you're only good to 350, and the box tells you that, that can inflate what they think they have. You know, the effects of poor preparation, there's not a detrimental outcome that there used to be. I mean, you hit the SOS button on the inReach, and then the troops are coming. And so, there's not as much risk and necessary skills to have before going to field, increased harvest rates, and obviously removes an animal's ability to go undetected. So one thing I do want to point out, before we get into Wisconsin numbers, though, there is a big difference when we look at technology across the country. The eastern states have too many whitetails that they cannot kill enough. Western states, we wait a long time for tags. We're in many cases resource limited, including water the further south we go. So, Wisconsin needed to knock down deer numbers. So shouldn't be taken as just a negative that they increased harvest. Keep in mind that this is what they wanted to do. But I've put this in here to demonstrate what an expanded technology does. The vertical bow requires the hunter to draw. The crossbow, you don't have to do it. It is easier to master. It's basically a increasing technology that was allowed. And what this data will show us is what that had to do on the harvest success. So I did add the total harvest. These numbers came from the Wisconsin Bow Hunters Association. You can see in 2013, that was the last year that they had, separated just gun and archery only. We had relatively similar success rates, 15%. 2014, they put in the crossbow. They legalized that during archery season. The vertical bow and gun seasons dropped a little bit in success, and we saw the crossbow slingshot up to 19%. 2015, that increased to 22%. In 2016, you almost had a 23% success with this new technology. You still have the archery guys. You can see that the harvest dropped a little bit, but the overall for the archery, but the overall harvest numbers did increase. So again, this is included as a pretty clear example of when you make it easier, in those early seasons, yes, the harvest rate does increase. This is again a graph that we've got on here. The yellow's the gun, green's archery, red's the crossbow success over that same time period of that data. You can see that more effective weapon in a primitive season is quite effective at harvesting deer. Just something to keep in mind as we're looking at technology. Considerations as you guys proceed as a group. I know that season structure is not part of the scope of this group, but a consideration would be that, historic archery seasons allowed pursuit during time of higher wildlife vulnerability. So these early seasons that folks have grown accustomed to, those were put into place at the time when, perhaps the animals were in the rut, such as elk or deer in the velvet. So they were more harvestable. And the reason that was sustainable because of the lower harvest rates. We've seen from this data that those harvest rates are increasing. Another interesting point, when fair chase first came about in the early days, rut hunting was not considered fair chase. No hunting was allowed. And this, again, was at the early 1900s when they were trying to turn around the fate of wildlife. But just another important note to have. Again, advanced short-range weapons, electronics, tactics may be appropriate to address population issues. Blanket ban on this stuff may not be the appropriate, recommendation coming out of this group. Rarely, if ever, is a single factor in wildlife-related issues the sole cause of a trend. There's no such thing as a golden bullet in wildlife. Each factor probably needs to be in concert with, we reduce technology to increase, habitat quality, more conservation efforts. It's going to take a few things like that to turn around all the trends we're seeing. But, that being said, each one does have a purpose. And then finally, roughly 78% of the U.S. population does not hunt but approves of it. With your recommendations, please consider the perceptions of this 78%. This is the majority that will decide hunting's future. Whenever I talked about fair chase or do, hunters are not a majority. What the public perceives us as doing out there is what's going to determine the fate of hunting going forward. And if there's a technology that the 78% deems unacceptable, if I'm on my computer at home, they're not going to think that's okay. And if that's what really happens, that doesn't matter. It's that perception. So any of these recommendations, make sure we're looking at that 78% that may not hunt themselves but do currently approve of it. Finally, I've got Mike, the Wisconsin Bow Hunters, and then Pope and Young Club on that data. So hopefully that was enlightening for the group, and we will.
Thank you,
Perfect.
Justin.
Thank you very much, Justin, and please stick around. We will get into questions after our last presentation. So our final presentation is from Tony Wasley, who is the president of the Wildlife Management Institute. Tony, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ann. Let me see if I can share my screen here. All right. You see that okay? I mean, there's nothing, right? Black screen?
We're looking at your notes pages as well, so
You are
still.
Nope, that's good.
okay. Thank you. Let me first thank Kyle and Justin. We didn't compare notes at all, but I got to say there's tremendous overlap, and the explanations they provided is going to save me a little bit of time. So thank you guys, and huge kudos to Idaho Fish and Game and all the members of the Hunting and Advanced Technology Working Group. These conversations need to happen, but they need to be informed by people that are in the field, seeing the technology in use or using the technology. So I really appreciate your involvement on this working group. I know it takes time away from other things like family and friends and Monday Night Football. So thank you for your contribution. And most of all, thanks for the opportunity to join you tonight for a few minutes. So as said, I'm Tony Wasley. I'm the president of the Wildlife Management Institute. WMI was formed in 1911 by a group of sportsmen just like you all, concerned about the decline in game species at the time. I was inspired by Kyle to pull up our mission statement. I didn't have it in my PowerPoint, but the mission statement of the Wildlife Management Institute is to inform, facilitate, and promote conservation and professional management of wildlife throughout North America. Our founders recognized significant declines in game species due to overexploitation and recognized the need for science regarding game protection and game propagation. As this was a time before wildlife management was even a recognized scientific field. So prior to coming to WMI nearly 2 years ago, I had a 26-year career with the Nevada Department of Wildlife, the last 10 of which I served as the agency's director. And during my time as director for the Nevada Department of Wildlife, the agency and commission wrestled with numerous issues of hunting technology that included trail cameras, smart weapons, smart triggers, thermal imaging, night vision, paraplanes, drones, caliber restrictions, just to name a few. And we also contended with a significant number of lawsuits, maybe hearkening to Justin's plea to consider those other 78%, because the lawsuits that we faced were challenging our public trust responsibilities, fair chase, and issues surrounding predator control, trapping. At one point in time, we had 7 simultaneous lawsuits pertaining to these issues. And happy to say we prevailed in all cases, but it is a significant cost and time sink as well. So I want to
Excuse me, Tony, we're not, oh, there we go. Now I
Yep.
see the slide. Okay. Okay.
no worry. Sorry to concern you there, Wendy.
No, that's all right.
I want to begin with just a generalization of this conversation and recognize that this is an oversimplification of the issue, but how I typically frame it in my mind. Ultimately, this conversation for me boils down to those things that improve our ability to safely and responsibly take wildlife, minimize animal suffering and maximize animal recovery, versus those things that give us a decidedly unfair advantage over animals in a way that doesn't achieve the former, generally runs counter to a fair chase standard, and ultimately threatens our hunting heritage. So I don't know if it was, I think it might have been Justin that said it, technology isn't necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. And it isn't, in and of itself, it isn't good or bad. It's the application of technology in which the debate exists. So start with a few givens here. Hunting is a highly regulated activity. Whether people want to acknowledge it or not, seasons, weapon, method are already highly regulated, and for good reason. Although what is regulated varies in virtually every state. And again, Justin alluded to it, the scenario in Wisconsin, we have CWD and really high population density. Maybe your harvest objectives are going to be higher than a desert state like Nevada. And I think trail cameras are a really good example of that. A few years ago, I had somebody in the trail camera industry who lived in Minnesota, and they just couldn't understand why trail cameras were such a big issue in the West, in Nevada in particular. And he said, Tony, I don't understand. What's the big deal with trail cameras? Well, this is somebody that lives in Minnesota. For crying out loud, you have 10,000 lakes. You know, water isn't a big issue. Nevada is the driest state in the union. So I show him a picture of the lone tree next to a water hole with 27 trail cameras on it on public land. And he says, oh, I get it. And so as you move around the country, the issues vary, the regulations vary. Unlike historic times, wildlife populations are not at risk as a result of technology. It's not that technology are causing population declines per se. And I think it's important to say that. And when I say unlike historic times, thinking about the era of overexploitation from 1850 to 1900 with punt guns, no limits, no seasons, there were a number of species that resulted in the formation of the Boone and Crockett Club. Number of species, near extinction or being lost, that was behind the creation of the Boone and Crockett Club. Technology is changing rapidly and will continue to change. And I don't know, again, if it was Kyle or Justin, but perhaps both of them acknowledge that this change is going to continue. Every single sector, from imagery, whether it's Google Earth, OnX, scope technology, turrets, compensators, communication from walkie-talkies to spot to inReach, transportation from ATVs, OHVs. Historically, a lot of people talked about the increase in four-wheel drives. Not everybody had a four-wheel drive vehicle. Now just about everybody not only has four-wheel drive, but they have off-road vehicles to get closer to do a lot of that work. Clothing, weaponry, ballistics, trail cameras, hunting apps, social media have all created or all been designed to create an advantage to the hunter. Wartime technology, drones, smart triggers, thermals, whether people are being exposed to this from their time in the service or they're being exposed to it from friends, colleagues, gaming culture, there is much greater transition of these wartime technologies into a hunting culture. So I'm not here to tell you more about technology, delve into any particular technology, but really just to share some thoughts and ideas. And 15 minutes is hardly adequate time to discuss any single area of technology. So rather than prepare a talk on any particular technology, I feel my time here is best used in simply offering some context and concepts in which to ponder the task that you all been handed, and hopefully you'll find something useful in that. So technology has evolved at a rate that exceeds the regulations surrounding it. And again, I think Justin mentioned this, we're chasing a moving target. Every state recognizes the rapid proliferation of hunting-related technology, and every state is responding by creating working groups such as this, subcommittees, and adopting and reaffirming commitments to fair chase standards. This isn't unique to Idaho. It's not unique to the West. It's widespread. And there exists a shifting baseline of awareness and acceptability within the hunting community. And what I mean by that shifting baseline, that if you talk to a generation of hunters, if you talk to somebody perhaps in their 80s that maybe hunted in the 1970s and they had a four-wheel drive pickup or maybe a three-speed Jeep and a handheld compass with open sights on a model 94 lever action 30-30 with an effective range of maybe 150 yards tops, versus in 2020, when a four-wheel drive side-by-side with a GPS, a turreted scope with built-in compensation, weather station data-informed app to inform adjustment for a 1,000-yard shot. That didn't happen overnight. And that baseline is a byproduct of exposure. The average age of this committee, and I was really curious about this, and I asked Idaho Fish and Game what the average age was, and they told me 48. That's 12 years younger than I am. And I think about what you as hunters have been exposed to, what you've seen in your lifetime versus perhaps somebody that's only 12 years older. And that baseline is shifting. And as it shifts, the acceptability also shifts. But again, thinking about that other 78% is really important, because hunters nationally, less than 5% of the population. In my home state of Nevada, less than 3% of the population. However, the statutory responsibility of all state wildlife agencies and Idaho Fish and Game is to take care of all the species for all the citizens. And so even though hunters are paying the bills, it is really the responsibility of Idaho Fish and Game to take care of all the species for all the citizens. And we need to think about how those other 78% feel about our recreational pursuits. So although Idaho is not Oregon or Washington with respect to that other 78%, it's also not Wyoming or Alabama. And I say that because Oregon and Washington have moved more rapidly to wildlife value orientations that are extending rights, see animals as having rights similar to or equal to people. Wyoming and Alabama are on the opposite end of that continuum. But as the population continues to grow in Idaho, you are seeing Idaho is shifting from a more utilitarian type mindset to a more mutualist type mindset. And so your social license to do what you do, to do what we do, is in part the result of social approval. And so thinking about that other 78%, not that 78% dictates it, but that what is done is at least aware of that, because the wildlife belong to the citizens of the state. In every state, wildlife are viewed as belonging to the citizens. So ultimately, the hunting heritage requires social acceptance of the methods and means. And regardless of how anybody feels about wolves or snowmobiles, the issue that transpired in Wyoming last winter was unsettling for a lot of that 78%. And it was also unsettling for a lot of the less than 5%. The technology of snowmobiles isn't bad technology, but it's, again, the application of that and thinking about just because it may not be illegal doesn't mean that it's ethical. If technology results in higher hunter success, it can reduce opportunity based on harvest objectives. And I don't need to say any more than that, because Justin did such a beautiful job of laying out some scenarios, hypothetical and real, with the results there. But I do think it's important that just to recognize that that if fewer tags are issued, it can become more difficult to recruit young hunters, which are a necessary and critical component to maintain the future of the hunting heritage. So discussions like this one are essential. And again, I really want to thank you all for stepping up and taking time away from your lives to be part of this. Sportsmen and women need to be the ones regulating themselves. They have a long history of being the ones to recognize the need for intervention and stepping up and making the change. From the creation of the Boone and Crockett Club in 1887 to the Wildlife Management Institute 1911 and Ducks Unlimited in the 1930s, sportsmen and women have been the best conservationists and recognized the needs and made things happen despite the objectives of those desiring to maintain the status quo. Regulations should be enforceable, but even those regulations that are difficult to enforce establish standards. If you think about it as an outdoors person, as a hunter, trapper, angler, you're oftentimes in places where if you chose to violate a law, it would be really difficult for somebody to catch you. You're up to your own ethics, your own standards, and your own morals to police your behavior. And so I know one of your charges is to make sure that your recommendations are enforceable. But I think enforceability, it varies. It's a continuum. And even those regulations that are difficult to enforce establish a standard and an expectation as far as a fair chase ethic. I would also say that regulation is much easier before investment or acceptance. And by that, I mean, before somebody runs out and spends $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 on a thermal scope with night vision, it's easier to regulate that prior to a bunch of people investing that much financially or emotionally or having it accepted as commonplace. When those things are accepted as commonplace, once people are financially and emotionally invested in a technology, regulating it creates a perceived loss, and those using the technology oftentimes feel that something's being taken away. People will complain regardless. Regardless of what you do, there will be complaints. Either it won't be enough or it'll be too much. But you aren't in these roles to please people. You're here to secure the future of hunting as a responsible and ethical heritage. I once heard leadership defined as disappointing people at a rate they can absorb. Leadership on the issue of technology will undoubtedly disappoint some, but keep in mind that disappointment may be in exchange for securing the future of the hunting heritage. Ultimately, the goal of any technology should be to contribute to the ethical take of wildlife that garners greater public support for the hunting heritage and that does not undermine fair chase. So by ethical, I put it in quotes because I just wanted to spend a few minutes on what ethical take is in my mind. It's quick, it's as painless as possible, minimal wounding, minimal meat loss, and high rate of recovery. So lastly, I want to end on a quote, an Aldo Leopold quote, and this quote was over 75 years ago. Then came the gadgeteer, otherwise known as the sporting goods dealer. He's draped the American outdoorsman with an infinity of contraptions, all offered as aids to self-reliance, hardihood, woodcraft, or marksmanship, but too often functioning as substitutes for them. Gadgets fill the pockets. They dangle from the neck and belt. The overflow fills the auto trunk and also the trailer. Each item of outdoor equipment grows lighter and often better, but the aggregate poundage becomes tonnage. This was written in 1948 by Aldo Leopold. And I just want to, again, thank you all for your time and energy in this effort. It's needed, it's warranted, it takes courage and it takes leadership This is a difficult task at hand, and I want to thank you both for your service and for the opportunity to join you for a few minutes this evening. Thank you, Wendy.
Well, thank you, Tony. We are a bit ahead of schedule, but I want to go ahead and stick with what the agenda had called for, which was a 5-minute break. And then we'll come back and give a good chunk of time for questions and answers. So with that, everyone, we will stop till 6:55 Mountain Time and reconvene for Q&A at 6:55. Okay. Welcome back from our first mini break. As a reminder to working group members, the way you can indicate an interest in asking a question is to use the reactions button on the bottom of your screen to raise your hand. Zoom will keep track of the order in which hands are raised. If you have a question for a specific one of our presenters, please address it to that person. If you're interested in hearing from more than one, then let us know. So with that, we will open for questions. Okay. Jason that's you that turned your camera on, is that correct? Did you have a question?
Wendy, Rob's hand is up.
Rob's hand. Okay, Rob, you may go ahead.
This question is for Justin. Speaking to the 78% of the public that supports hunting but is non-hunters, have you seen instances across the country where technology has led to backlash against hunting?
Specifically, just kind of I don't know if you remember when there was the company out of Texas that tried to have you could shoot a deer via, your computer screen. Obviously, there was a giant uproar. The overall detestment of that, by both hunters and non-hunters would probably be the best example, but not a specific one. I think we've done pretty good at keeping our ear to the ground before jumping into something too drastic to where we've seen a major turn, but we still have 78%, so we're doing a decent job at it.
Okay, Jason Top, you have your hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, I got a few questions here. So with Justin, the 78% of the people that you guys are talking about, are there any is there any data or anything that is showing what the perception is? I mean, I'm hearing we want to keep that perception good for those folks, or we just bounce around what we might think could be the perception for these folks.
There is an
I guess-
actual there is a research group. I know the guy and I can't remember his name right now, but Duda.
Mark Duda.
Yep, Duda has done extensive research on this, and it's probably outdated. I've used 78% for the last 10 years. I'm not sure if it's still the same, but that was the research that I originally got, that 78% statistic that I kind of always go back to, and they've done a great job of analyzing trophy and all those different things in the non-hunting and hunting perspective, and that is the place to get that data, is from his organization.
Thank you for that. And then I have one more question for you, Beans. You're up here. When I'm looking back at your harvest reports that you were showing on there, back in 1975, it was showing some of the reports. Those, what I would feel would be most likely from check stations and things like that, because they weren't requiring people to do harvest reports, at least not in Idaho, until 1998. And with the technology that has came along, computers have come along. I mean, when I was in high school, they just started computers, right? So now people are able to look at them more online and do their harvest reports online. Wouldn't you think that it's showing a better harvest report coming out nowadays versus back then? So our numbers from 1998 on would be more accurate?
Oh, definitely. And we see that in, the records kept by Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young and all that. With advancing technology, that's a positive. We have a far better grasp on it, and it's a lot more precise. But when you look at the overall picture, is it what I bet the farm on those earlier numbers? No. But I do think that trend line to establish does give us an idea that it is increasing, which is what we're trying to take away from those data.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That's all I had.
Other questions from working group members? Alex Martin?
Hey, this one's for Justin as well. Mike Schlegel's a good friend of mine, and he sent me that same data that you sent us today. Would you say that you've seen a perception across the country where people are starting to question the validity of archery seasons because of the increased success rates? I know this is a loaded question. I'm a traditional bow hunter myself, just so you know, I'm a bow hunter. But
What you're starting to see is the increasing technology has happened much quicker in archery, so we're seeing the effects of it, which is why I pointed to the crossbow. You know, it's a shorter time period. We can see, I mean, archery technology is amazing. I can stand in my yard and hit a target at 110 yards, you know, in the kill zone 10 times out of 10. I mean, you didn't used to be able to do that. You're seeing the idea that this increasing technology and effectiveness is not it's increasing harvest rates, and so the opportunity and the season lengths and whatnot, you're seeing more big bucks taken early season. They're more vulnerable. You have a better technology, you're taking them. That's the upswell. It's not a, you know, it's not a we don't want an archery hunt or we don't want archery seasons. It's the season structure that many states set up historically with low harvest rates may not be sustainable with the increasing technology unless something is done.
thank you. That's a good answer.
Chelsea Merriman?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you all for some excellent presentations. My questions are for Kyle, actually. I was wondering if you could just repeat those definitions that you gave for both fair chase and the comprehensive statement on emerging technology, because they weren't on your slides, but I found them to be really interesting.
Yeah, no problem. So, fair chase hunting is defined as the ethical, sportsmanlike, and lawful pursuit and taking of any free-ranging wild game animal in a manner that does not give the hunter an improper or unfair advantage over the game animals. And then regarding the technology piece, like I said, we got to the point where we realized that the technology is not going anywhere. And instead of trying to, you know, police every single bit of technology, we tried to boil it down into a statement that could encapsulate as much as we could. And it was the use of any technology that delivers real-time location data, including photos, to target or guide a hunter to any species or animal in a manner that elicits a real-time or immediate response by the hunter, at least on the record side, would not be eligible for entry into our records. And like I said, it was done with trail cameras in mind, but I mean it applies to any type of technology. You know, a text from my uncle that I'm hunting with saying, "Hey, I'm staring at a big bull." He just delivered real-time information or data to me. And if I went there and shot that bull, that elicited a real-time immediate response for me, would not be eligible.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Kyle, real quick, I know y'all put together a pretty extensive white paper on just technology and hunting. Would you be comfortable with me sharing that with the group also, that kind of dives into the background on that broad statement?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay,
No
perfect.
problem. Yeah.
Okay, Nathan, Guy.
All right, this one is for Tony. Your last statement that you talked about, you'd said, ethical fair chase is the fastest kill with the least amount of wounding and high recovery rate for an animal. Would you then say that the guy that has invested into a long range gun, practices 20, 30,000 rounds a year, that can shoot 800-900 yards or 1,000 yards, could be better than the guy with Grandpa's 30-06 that only shoots 5 shots a year that wounds a hind quarter? So is that technology in your mind, from what you're coming from there, is that a good or bad thing?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair question, a good question. And I think you could ask that of almost all the technologies. I think where it becomes a challenge is when it gets that broader social acceptance in the community, like, well, you know, my buddy shoots 1,000 yards and they don't understand just the amount of time that people put in. And so if as a community, the standard is lowered, and as a community, the result is more, you know, wounding, more animal loss, you know, decrease in recovery. Then we have to ask ourselves, is that the best thing for our heritage? So I mean, that's a really valid question. I think you could ask that with a lot of these technologies for sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Jason? Top?
Sorry, I'm jumping on here. This computer's a little slow.
We see ya.
This one's for Tony as well. Tony, you mentioned a little bit ago about making rules that were hard to enforce. Do you not find that as a disservice to the taxpayers when they have to go to court to try and enforce these rules?
I'm sorry, could you say that again, please?
You'd made a comment that it was okay to make rules that were hard to enforce. At least that's the way I understood you saying it.
No, well, what I was saying is I think part of your charge here is to only put forward recommendations that are enforceable. Like it can't be, you know, some arbitrary. And I understand and appreciate the importance from a law enforcement standpoint of enforceability. And really that gets to, you know, those individual wardens, and when they write a citation, is that something that they feel that they can defend and be, you know, successful in defending the issuance of that citation. What I was, I guess, trying to say is that as sportsmen and women, we're out in the field by ourselves a lot, and there are a lot of challenges in enforcing fish and game laws, and it may not be as black and white as enforceable, unenforceable, and to not be discouraged in discussing and considering regulations solely based on a perceived, you know, challenge of enforceability. I think, you know, your point about, yeah, we don't want people just writing paper on things that are going to be tossed out in the courts and eat up everybody's time, but as a standard, there's a lot of trail cam regulations in Nevada, trap visitation. There are issues that are difficult to enforce, but yet, you know, set a standard, help form a standard for an ethic. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I understood that. Thank you very much.
And I would, just while I have the floor, make one comment. We talk about that 78%. I think it's important that 78% was a study 5 years ago in 2019, and that 78% was for regulated, responsible, you know, hunting. When you throw in trophy hunting, I mean, that plummets. I think it's lower than 20%. And so when you think about technology, you think about that 78% that doesn't hunt, and what appeals to them about hunting, what is most acceptable to the non-hunting public about hunting is, number one, the food value, number two, the money it generates for conservation, and number three, that it's regulated. And so when you are talking about technologies that potentially hinder the food value, you know, if it's a 50 caliber and you're going to have a whole bunch of bloodshot meat or waste or something, then that non-hunting, that 78%, starts to raise their eyebrows. And you talk about technology that contributes to trophy hunting, which only has less than 20% approval, then those are the technologies that are going to raise eyebrows from the non-hunting community. Not that they should be driving or dictating policy, but just from a point of awareness.
Thank you.
Okay, Tal Sampson.
You're muted, Tal.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I got it. Hey, I'd like to ask Kyle a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Kyle, I appreciate you for showing up and helping us out today. Hey, this paper I got is Boone and Crockett's take on long range shooting. It was written in 2014 and updated in 2021. I'm just going to read the last, part of it. It says the club finds that long range shooting takes unfair advantage of the game animal, effectively eliminates the natural capacity of an animal to use its senses and instincts to detect danger, and demeans the hunter-prey relationship in a way that diminishes the importance and the relevance of the animal and the hunt.
Yeah, and long range is defined by each individual hunter. We didn't set to make a
But
number.
what is it that question there where it says that it takes unfair advantage of the animal, what are they saying there in that statement?
Well, that touched on what Justin mentioned about the three senses of animals, which are sight, sound, and smell. And so you're essentially negating all three of those senses. And what long range is to one person might not be what it is to another. And so you have to come up with that distance, but at some distance, you are essentially negating those three senses that the animal has at its disposal to get away from you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Tal. I am not seeing any other hands raised. Okay. Oh, there goes one. Tal's got his hand up again.
Yeah, did somebody get their hand up before me?
No, you were it. We got one after you, but you can go.
Okay. Hey, all right. I'd like to ask Tony a question. Tony, as far as scoping in the public, and I think somebody touched on this just a minute ago about, their favorability in methodology. What has been done there? I know I believe you said that you worked in Nevada. And I would think with the percentage of hunters being so low there, that perception of the public is even more important. But my perception is in hunting for years and years and years is the public really doesn't know a lot. How do you make sure that technology, and is there any scoping done? Just like the Idaho Fish and Game is putting us together and getting us to talk, what can be done to make sure that you don't reach a threshold to where people are then pointing fingers and it's harder to come back from that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I would point to what's referred to as America's Wildlife Values Survey. And this is a survey that was originally done, I think, in 2003 and then redone in 2018. And it was originally done just in the Western US in 2003, and then 15 years later done in 2018 nationwide. And is currently we're developing the new survey to do it. It's also been done in Canada and it's been done globally. So there's Canada Wildlife Values and Global Wildlife Values, and there's a state specific chapter in each of those. And so you can find that online if you look at America's Wildlife Values Survey. There's an Idaho specific report. Each state has an opportunity to add questions, to do a deeper dive. There's 3 tiers, and in Nevada, we asked a lot of questions about bear hunting and predator control, and to understand, the public views. And so the one thing that I would share is that probably the most concerning bit of data from that. So this is social sciences. This is coming out of Colorado State, Warner College of Natural Resources, social scientists, and they look at how people relate to wildlife, and every state, with the exception of South Dakota and Wyoming, which were virtually unchanged in the 15 years between 2003 and 2018, every state was moving away from utilitarian towards a mutualist orientation, which is more of the animal rights element. The number of people in society that are distanced, those that just don't care, remain, largely unchanged. The number of pluralists remain unchanged. So it's really this shift between utilitarian and mutualist, and that's a great study to look at.
Okay. Yeah, well, I loved what you said about the standard too. I think that's important. It's protecting our legacy. I'm an old guy. You know, I was taught with the .6 and the how close to get, and it's kind of hard for me to I want to understand some of this technology, and I don't hate technology, but I do agree that we have to have some parameters, and all sports are dealing with this. It's not just hunting, but the public perception to me is super important. I'm a taxidermist. I've had lots of discussions with people about hunting, the value of it, the legacy of it. Everybody's ancestors hunted. It's an important concept, but one thing to keep in mind, before 1950, almost all game animals were killed within the perimeter of one. I think it's up to us to make sure that that this is a prestigious honor to be able to hunt, and to make sure we're doing it right.
So Ken Crane has a question.
Yeah, I guess it's not so much a question for anybody in particular, but it's one of the things I'm struggling with here. We've heard a lot about technology, and even today, learned a lot. We appreciate you guys coming on and doing this, but even today, nobody really wants to say, what range is considered long range and inappropriate, right? And it's hard to, because, the comment was made earlier, is there an ethical difference between the practiced, educated long-range shooter that can ring the bell out to 1,000 yards, as opposed to the guy that won't go out and practice and consistently hit a target at, a couple hundred? And it seems to me we're not, I don't know, it seems like we're kind of chasing our tail trying to regulate the technology, when really we're trying to manage the people and their decisions. And it's kind of almost every rule you think about is made to address the lowest common denominator. And it seems like we kind of need to think and talk about that a little bit and try to manage those people that are making poor decisions. And there is no doubt, if an animal has no idea you're there, that there is a significant advantage, and that's not to be ignored. But it's the people as much as the technology that I think we need to consider in this effort.
So-
I'd like to
Go ahead, Justin.
No, I was going to say, the question to Kyle on that long range paper that was written, that was my time at Boone and Crockett, and I was involved in the writing of that. And you are completely correct. It is the people. And the reason that there was not a range assigned is the same reason that Boone and Crockett doesn't say an 8-foot fence is high fence. You know how many 7'11" fences would go up? It's up to the individual hunter. It's when you're, obviously if you're shooting beyond the distance that your bullet can expand and deliver the minimum, energy that needs to kill the animal, okay, that's too far. But, the hunter has to decide, is getting within 600 range really beating this animal on a fair playing field, the true definition of fair chase? The animal has an equal opportunity to detect you and escape than you do to harvest it, if not better. And so, yeah, it is individuals, and there is a personal responsibility in all this stuff. You can regulate some, but it's having these conversations. It's showing the effect of, taking an animal where it can't detect you. And so you're completely correct, but you that's why BNC never said 500 yards is too far, 700 yards is too far. That hunter that only shoots the 30-06 with open sights, 100 yards could be long range. I've got a 220-yard range in my basement. That's a chip shot. So it's each individual hunter, and they need to decide, where am I taking advantage of the animal via technology?
Okay, Chelsea Merriman.
Sorry, I'm writing that quote down, Justin. That was an awesome quote. My question is for Tony. When you were at NDOW, what did you see the rate of shifting baseline syndrome as being? And do you think that moving forward, that rate of shifting baseline is going to continue linearly, exponentially, logarithmically, or in some other way? I find that to be truly interesting.
Yeah, I think that shifting baseline happens at the same rate as technology advances. And since we've all acknowledged that technology is probably advancing exponentially, I think that shifting baseline is likely, following that. I don't feel like an old guy. I still shoot the same rifle that I purchased at Gart Sports on Yellowstone Avenue in Pocatello in 1995. I still have the same scope that I got at Cal Ranch around the corner in Pocatello in 1995. I haven't changed either one of them. But when I go out with my friends and they're asking about turrets and compensators and I've shot, I can't tell you how many elk and deer I've shot. The longest shot I've ever taken is 253 yards, not because I can't shoot, but because I love to sneak. I love to play the light and the wind, and I love that. I should probably be an archery hunter, but I don't have the wherewithal to pick up a new weapon. I love to, lay in the snow or belly crawl. That's the challenge for me, but that's me. And that's not for me to say what it should be for you. I think it's interesting, the question that just came up, and we just had some discussion about that long range shooting. Idaho Fish and Game would probably kill me for even mentioning this, but you have to take a class. You have to have a bow hunter certificate to shoot a bow in Idaho, don't you? Isn't that a requirement? I mean, you have to take a test to drive a car. I couldn't even volunteer for Idaho Fish and Game without taking a test. Maybe there's somewhere that you certify, long range shooters. I don't know how many there are. I don't know what kind of burden that would be. Like I said, Idaho Fish and Game probably get mad at me. But if there's some way to demonstrate your competency, and you get a certificate, just like a concealed carry card, hey, I've demonstrated I can ring the bell 1,000 yards. You get a card, man. You can do it.
Okay, Dylan Halverson.
Hi guys, I just want to say I appreciate you guys getting on today and doing these speeches and presentations. I appreciate that. It's very informative. Something that a couple of the questions, and this kind of goes to all three of you. If I have to pick somebody, I guess I'll pick Kyle, but all three feel free to chime in on this. Everybody kind of keeps pointing to the questions of, the long range shooter who's very, proficient and can shoot out to 1,000 yards. And then, somebody else who perhaps has a more traditional type weapon, from let's say the 1950s, to pick a time frame, with like a 4-power scope on a, grandpa's .6. And your guys is, you interact with the country as a whole, to some degree, Kyle. Are there very many states that implement shooting tests? This is a very, very popular model in like Scandinavia. It is a requirement in some of the Scandinavian countries, some of the European countries. I'm not really advocating for this. I'm just as something to bring up and to discuss. That kind of reaches the kind of what everybody's getting at, I guess, is really at that point, it's not so much the weapon, it's the individual and their proficiency to be able to accomplish, whatever the test is that's being provided that they need to pass annually. And I guess that's my question.
I don't know about I don't know of any state or province that requires a shooting test. Not, I mean, Tony, Justin, you guys know?
The closest that you'd have is certain states do limit the number of shells that a hunter can take a field on a wildlife management area. That would be about as close to a limiting factor on shooting that I'm aware of.
But I think you bring up a good point. I mean, it's all, and that's what Boone and Crockett tries to stress is it's up to the individual and the hunters, as a collective to think about how we're acting in the field can have great consequences on, if we can continue and how we continue.
Yeah, and I guess to real quick piggyback on that too, have any of you guys ever seen any studies or any polling done with hunters in the US on that topic? So in other words, what hunter reception of that discussion is? Have you ever seen anything on that? And that's all I have.
Other than that study Tony mentioned earlier, not that I'm aware of.
Thank you, guys.
So last call for questions. We've got 3 more minutes. Well, okay then. We are going to move into the next part of the agenda. Where we're going to break into small groups twice. Just to remind you about how this works, you'll get an invitation to join a breakout room, with the exception of one group, which will stay here. And so if you don't get an invitation, it means you're staying put. You don't have to go anywhere. Please turn on your camera so that to help other people understand what you're saying. And each group, if you could pick one person to take notes, to summarize the conversation, and then that person should send via email their notes to me for incorporation into the meeting documentation. The breakout rooms are going to close up automatically. When your time is up, we're going to give you 30 minutes for each question. We will take a break between the 2 questions because we learned last time it's really hard for Ellery to sort everyone out and give you new assignments. So we're going to give you a 5-minute break between questions. Any questions about how we're doing the breakout rooms? Just don't forget to identify one person to take notes for you.
And Wendy, before we do that, I just want to say thank you to our presenters this evening.
Yes.
You're more than welcome to stick around for the remainder of the meeting, or if you want to get back to your regular programming at home, you're more than welcome to jump off as well. So don't feel like you're obligated to stick around, but you're more than welcome to if you're interested in doing so. So just thank you again for your time and your expertise and spending it with us.
Thank you, Ellery.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks everyone. I'm gonna check out. I got leave tomorrow for Charlotte. So but thanks everyone for having me, and yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to me at Boone and Crockett if you have any questions.
Thanks, Kyle.
Same thing from Pope and Young. I really appreciate the opportunity. If there's anything you can do, feel free to email me or reach out to the organization. And it's been an honor to talk to you guys, and you got quite the task ahead of you. Good luck.
Thank you, Justin.
And I guess I have to follow those 2 again, and I could just say ditto in the interest of time. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Tony. Alrighty. Well, your first question, we'd like you to reflect on how you developed your hunting ethics and how they might have evolved over time. So please explore this question in your small groups. Accept the invitation and you'll have 30 minutes to talk amongst yourselves about this question.
All right, I'm going to open up the breakout sessions. Bryce, Chelsea, Dustin, and Ken, you will stay in this main room, so you will not get a invitation to a breakout room. Everyone else should. So here we go. All right, group 5, it is all you.
Hello, everybody. How are you guys? Am I the only one here?
Hey, yeah. How goes it?
Another beautiful day stuck in paradise. And yourself this evening?
Doing okay. Is it snowy up in Chalice right now?
No, it was almost 50 degrees day. Wearing a banana belt. There's snow if you want to find snow. But other than that, no, I was out fishing this afternoon before the meeting.
And sunbathing, apparently.
Yeah, it worked out pretty nice for once. I fooled Mother Nature.
Rock on. Way cool. I guess first off, do we have any takers for note takers?
I'm gonna graciously bow out because I'm terrible at notes.
Yeah, I can do it. I'll be the scribe.
Hey,
I appreciate
Bryce
that,
saves the
Bryce.
day.
Yeah, you betcha.
Did you wish Jack a happy birthday on Friday?
I did, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I actually had a call with him today about some other work stuff, but yeah, small world.
That's so funny. I think he's talking to my husband right now about a future elk hunt. So yeah. Yeah. I guess how did you guys develop your hunting ethics and how have they evolved over time?
Well, it's funny. I just took out my daughter for the first time chasing chuckers over Thanksgiving, and it dawned on me that when I started hunting, I was one of those, if it flies, it dies. If it's brown, it's down. Right. It was very, 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 very much about me going out and taking an animal. Now it's not that important. I'm very much like the gentleman from Arizona. I much prefer to crawl through the snow. I prefer the actual hunt and the adrenaline rush of it and putting myself up against it. I I find myself not hating other people because they're wanting to not do that, right? To take that a little bit more of a distant shot. Um, I'm in no place to tell that person that they can't do that. Because if you would have talked to me 20 years ago and I had the option to have a 7 PRC that I could shoot a deer at 850 yards out on the desert with, I would have taken that opportunity every day of the week. Now I'll graciously pass and crawl around with my muzzleloader because that's what I prefer to do. That's what I enjoy hunting. But I don't feel like I have a right to tell somebody that they can't get that same sense of enjoyment out of their time in the woods that I do just because they do it differently.
Army crawling with a muzzleloader is my idea of a magical day.
Oh, dude, it's
So you
it's
and I
it's
have that.
it's just
The
yeah.
elation I have
Until
during
you
a
see the white butts running away, then it's frustrating. But it's it's a good time, and I think I mean, I get a lot of crap from my buddies too because I'm a traditional muzzleloader. I like my patch and ball 54 caliber, and it may not be the quickest, most effective way how to kill an animal. I don't shoot it very far. I refuse to shoot past 75 yards, so I feel like it's fairly ethical. But it's really, really hard to argue that point with a lot of these long range hydrostatic bullets that are on the market. I mean, they go to sleep right now. in a lot of cases. They really, really, really do. I don't like to say it because it that when the appropriate gear is used, it is very, 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 very deadly, very, very quick, and very efficient. Um, so you can't really say that the gear is any part of what I would consider to be ethical, if that makes sense, right?
Mhm.
It's really, really, really weird dichotomy, that quote, that Aldo quote that guy gave for the tinkerer. That
Yeah.
sums me up absolutely perfectly. I've got all of the gear. I mean, to the T, I could pack out 50 pounds if I wanted to. But in the last 5 years, most of that stuff has stayed home. Right. I
Yeah.
went through that time. I gathered all the goods. I went out. I used all that I could. And now I'm in that portion of my hunting thought and what I consider to be a fair chase hunt to be where the animal has an absolute advantage on it. I mean, we've got so much going for us as a human already, right? All that their instincts is basically all they have, and we have ways to conceptually go around that in our mind, right? We can play the wind, we can play the terrain, we can make judgments to be
Mhm.
able to try to offset that feature of the animal. And it's just really weird to explain for me, I guess, how right, how I find it enjoyable and it's ethical in my eyes, but just because I find it enjoyable. There's a lot of people that don't think that going out with a patch and ball muzzleloader is a very ethical way to hunt because it is a very slow kind of. I mean, I've never had a cow just go to sleep from one of my muzzleloader rounds. I wish I could say that I have, but I haven't. Maybe if I were to shoot a new conical bullet or something of that nature, I'd have that effect. But with the way that I enjoy doing it, I'd rather shoot that more traditional kind of traditional deal. And in my eyes, in my mind, I guess I've wrapped whatever I could around it to make it think that I'm doing it in an ethical manner.
I really like that you brought up almost like a regress in technology as being of that questionable ethical state. And it makes me wonder like what Boone and Crockett has to say about the efficacy and the ethicalness of muzzle loaders. Because I think they were the ones that had that, or was it Tony that had that comment about like things that are going to help improve take and decrease
That
wanton
was,
waste. Was that Tony?
yeah, that was Pope
Okay.
and Young.
Oh, that was
Yeah.
Pope Young. Okay, so Justin. So that is a really interesting thought because yeah, I I think I've got that weird Puritan work ethic almost of like the more my blood, sweat, and tears go into it, the more I've earned it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
and maybe that's it. Is like I'm covered head to toe in brambles. I got in the poison ivy, and now I'm about to go systemic. I've got one shot with my muzzle loader, and then I'm in trouble because
Right.
I have no upper body strength. So I got to make this count, and therefore I have earned it. And that doesn't necessarily linearly translate over to the efficacy of the kill or the humanity of the
Exactly.
kill. Even that's a
Yeah.
really good point.
Yeah, that's where I'm struggling the most right now with
Yeah.
this whole endeavor is that pull between my, and maybe I'm just in my head too much. That could be it too. I don't know. What do you guys?
I think there's a couple of things. I don't think any of us want to take away what everybody else likes to do. Because I'm in the same way. But I like to ring still out as far as I can shoot, which isn't nearly as long as some of these guys that are sitting here listening to us talk can do.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things we have to really keep thinking about is we all enjoy having the opportunity to hunt every year. And I think the statistics that we were showing today on how success rates have changed, and I would argue, looking at those statistics, that there's no statistically significant difference between the success of archery and rifle hunting. There is a couple percentages, but statistically speaking, that's, I think, insignificant. There was a pretty significant change between the vertical bows, he called them, and the crossbow. And I think there's a big change there. But I think what we need to be keeping in mind is that as we become more efficient at killing animals, that population can't sustain that level of harvest when we're letting the number of tags go out annually. So something's going to have to give. Either we need to dumb down what we're hunting with, or we're going to have to concede that the number of tags, the seasons that we can do this kind of hunting in, because I think too, Boone and Crockett guy talked about hunting during the rut was not considered ethical early on. And so we have muzzleloader seasons, we have rifle seasons, we have archery seasons, and during the ruts, during our breeding seasons of every animal that we hunt. And sooner or later, all this is going to catch up. And the technology is one factor of that. The seasons and the availability of tags, the length of the season, when the season occurs, all that's going to have to get addressed to balance this out. And so I think that's where we're in charge too, is looking at that technology arm of that. And somehow we're going to have to talk and have that, where do we draw the line? Where do we recommend that line is going to be? And maybe there's it's across the board, limiting not just rifles, but that seems to be the most high-tech, obvious route, but archery and muzzleloader perhaps too. You go to inlines and these different powders, breech loading, that plays a whole different level of game in your success as a muzzleloader hunter.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's really interesting. I like the way you framed that. So in reading all of the comments that we received, I feel like a lot of them were saying, like, in short, they don't want government setting regulations, and they don't want all four of us Californians here talking about how to set these standards. But I feel like all of us, the actual Idahoans, are actually talking about how do we promote self-regulation. And that was one thing that I really liked Tony's talk about, was that self-regulation. Because I don't see this as setting a bunch of rules and laws. I see it as we've got 24 of us that are sitting together talking about, like, how do we purport longevity in something that we define a lot of our recreation by, if that makes any sense. And I don't know, we're kind of steering away from ethics, but I do think that is a sticky question. But I like the idea of, like, this is just a consensus towards self-regulation. And I think that's what kind of the department's hoping for.
Yeah, and Chelsea, kind of to piggyback off of that, when I initially read the prompt question or interpret it, it's how did you develop your hunting ethics, and how have they evolved over time? I feel like Dustin and you, Chelsea, summarize kind of the hunting journey that we discussed a month ago, where it's like the progression of, like, doing things harder. But the ethics is like, doesn't matter the equipment, do you take that shot or not? Right. So, and that's where I thought of, like, okay, how did I develop, like, what I thought was acceptable as a ethical distance to shoot, or ethical or what would be appropriate in my mindset of, like, what I do out in the field hunting. And that's where it's like, my response was like pretty much friends and family, like my mentors starting hunting, where it's like, you don't want animals to suffer. You want to do everything you can to, like, make a clean kill and harvest, and be respectful for the animal when you take out meat, and how you care for the meat and the whole process. Like, that idea of ethics, that's how it was established for me. That, I would say, hasn't really changed over time. It's more the technology has changed in how I apply that, right? Like, I have guns that can shoot 1,000 yards. I still shoot animals and have like a cap on like, I'm not going to shoot over 350 yards. Like I can hammer down 350 yards all day long. And I know I can like harvest under pretty much any condition at that distance and know I've done everything I can, practicing, prepping for that to do that. So that's like the technology has allowed me to what I probably started out as like a 200-yard shot was like with the old 721 30-06. That was my grandpa's, like that was a long shot. So like that's how my ethics, I would say, really haven't changed, but the technology has changed. And as you go through like the progression of your hunting journey or whatever it is, you start using muzzleloaders and making it harder. But your shot distance is not like I'm going to use a muzzleloader. I don't want to shoot 500 yards. It's like I'm going to use a muzzleloader because it's hard, and I'm still not going to want to like I don't want to shoot over 100 yards if I don't have to. So that's like kind of how I see these two parallel things, and technology bridges that gap. But like, how do you establish that ethics of like, don't use thermal optics? It's bad. Like it's an unfair advantage. Like in my head, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. But that's how I perceive things, or how like the ethic component has been instilled in me. So how do you get that into like other people so you don't have to have like this constant issue of not everyone looking or interpreting things the same way with like the same kind of ethical standards? And I think that was taking this full circle was a great comment someone made of like, yeah, we have to regulate to the least common denominator because like, unfortunately, people will abuse it and it's a small percentage potentially, but if that goes on unregulated or unaddressed, like that could become the new norm. And is that something we want as like a hunting community to keep this, I don't know, tradition or like recreational activity alive?
And I think you touched on a couple of things that are important. And we can regulate the technology, but I think it's the ethical values of people and the choices they make ultimately at the end of the day. And, you know, I think about how I grew up. I grew up in a community where everybody in the family got a tag, but there was really only one hunter. But somehow all those tags got filled. And so even though mom and grandma never, you know, went out, that was perfectly acceptable when I was a kid. Everybody did it. And nowadays it's not so much. And you know, and I think it's maturation and leading by example, and you know, the values and education of what we need to do to kind of try to meet everybody's wants and needs, and still have a healthy game herd. And I think that needs to be something that we need to talk about too, not just the hard what is allowed and what's not allowed, but you know, how do we create a discussion that gets people thinking about these things that we're talking about and a broader scope, and it's not just a whack 'em stack 'em mentality. And I think we'll be more successful if we incorporate that piece in there too.
Agreed. Sorry, I'm just typing a whole bunch of stuff down real quick.
That was, I think, really well put. And it is I think you hit really well at that concept of we're in a sticky situation because we're making recommendations about technology, but this is less a technology or a science or a management issue and more just like a social issue. And that's not quite as formulaic or scientific or cut and dry as simply like, here's your line. Anything beyond that's unethical, and anything before that's ethical. That's not the case. It really is hunter by hunter.
We live in a state that is very, very independent. And I imagine most of us sitting in this group are as well, that don't like anybody else telling us what we can or can't do within reason. So I think that, like you said, that social aspect of what our responsibility is as a hunting community needs to be part of that equation at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I will say or make a comment too. It was the having more emphasis on the non-hunting, the public that is non-hunting but supportive of hunting aspect in all three of the presentations today was really interesting because I get the idea of like we don't want the non-hunting public, we like don't tread on me type mentality of like we don't want the non-hunters telling us what we can and can't do. But it is a public resource. Like hunting, wildlife, it's a public resource, and it matters what non-hunting public thinks. So yeah, I don't think that we should necessarily completely, that should drive everything we think about or what we recommend, but I think it's really important to consider, right? What the non-hunting public thinks of like the use of thermal optics or drones or all these other emerging technologies and kind of what hunters or what state agencies come up with allowable or acceptable practices for harvest. So it was nice where I felt like that was largely dismissed or disregarded in the previous presentations, where there was a lot of industrialized harvesting entities and spokespeople like being like, this is kind of our ideas or thoughts on a lot of electronics or whatever the technologies. And this was a little bit different angle than the previous group.
For sure.
Yeah, you're right. We did talk. There was some discussion in our earlier meetings about that point. You know, that we have to accept the responsibility and take the leadership, and as a hunting community, not necessarily just our group, but as a hunting community, we need to be ahead of this, managing ourselves. Because if we don't do that very well and have a bad perception on that 78%, they're going to shut us down. And we see it happening around us.
Oh yeah. Ken, I have a question for you in that regard. Let's see if I can put this into words because you brought up that most of us here and many of us within the hunting community are of the fiercely independent mindset of we don't like people telling us what we can and cannot do within reason. And I think like my biggest pet peeve in the whole wide world is when somebody asks me to do something that I'm already doing. And so it kind of seems rough to have somebody tell me like be an ethical hunter when I like to think that every time I go outside and don't pull the trigger, that's me being an ethical hunter. I just am excited for the day. I'm brave enough to shoot my muzzleloader out to 75 yards. That's just not me. I'm gonna belly crawl as close as possible. But I guess how do we, for you, Ken, how do we take that fierce independence and couple it with this camaraderie and us as this unified group of hunters with a love and a passion for what it is we do, and say like, I don't know, shift the framework to be like we are regulating this, to be like we are voluntarily opting for the perpetuation of hunting and fishing to abide by these. Does that make sense? And I don't even know if we can do that if we're like recommending to the commission, here's our recommendations for regulations, but it's also to us as 24 people, our charter of what we think ethical hunting could be. And I want to know your thoughts on that word vomit because I want to give Bryce props for being able to put that into writing.
Yeah, we'll see how the notes go. I'll send them around to you guys to make sure I captured this.
Yeah. You know, and I don't think we can, I think the short answer is lead by example, and then ask retrospective questions, you know, that get people thinking. And I had a boss once that when he saw something that was going on that he didn't like, wasn't meeting his expectation, his question to whoever was, is this how we do things around here? And that didn't necessarily tell a person that they were doing bad, but that put that person in a spot to think about what they were doing and whether they were doing the right thing. And then that kind of, develops and grows, masticizes it within themselves, that then they're making that decision. They're thinking, and then perhaps that decision is a little different next time. And they're looking to do whatever they were doing at a different standard, and meet others' expectations. So I think that's kind of how my thought pattern is, you can't tell anybody, that's why we live in Idaho, because we have a lot of room to roam. We have a lot of decision space to do a lot of different things. And that's the way we want it. We want to keep it that way. So I think for me, it's just lead by example. Don't impose my will on everybody else unless that other person's behavior is affecting and reducing my ability to enjoy my life. Then, and kind of help them understand a little bit, make them think perhaps, and perhaps their behavior would change.
So we're looking more at an educational recommendation for some sort of weird social media program like Arizona's got going on there with their hashtag fair chase. Like, how would you? There's what couple people that are tuned in, I think, this evening to this meeting. Obviously, there's a lot of public involvement because there is a ton of public comments that have coming in. But how would you impress that on the masses, so to speak? Right? Like I run a sporting goods store. I see probably close to, 2,500 hunters between bow season, rifle season, muzzleloader season, all of the above. Right? I can do my part and try to do something like that and put it in their head. But there's that 10% of them that one, you're just not flat out going to reach. But it's for the masses, if that's what we're really worried about. Not, I mean, the technology has something to do with it, but it's always going to be there. And what it boils down to is how do we impress upon the general public what the state or what the hunting public of Idaho, for the most part, and then even the non-public, think is ethical for us to do in the state of Idaho with all of our animals. I mean, like they said, right? It is a public resource. It is for everybody. And I get to see everybody that comes through my store. I'm a multifunctional sporting goods store. I get the people that don't even look up at the mounts because they don't like to see dead animals that come through my store. And then I get the guys that will absolutely lose anything and everything they possibly can to shoot that buck that's on that ridge, whether it's 1,800 yards away or not. I would like to think that all those people that come through have the same basic ideal, right? They all want a clean, good, quick, ethical kill on it. Otherwise, I don't think that they would be pursuing the animals that they were pursuing, spending the money that they were doing. But how would you take that? I mean, that's a need that we need to have. How would you spread that around? What would be a way of doing that? Because if it boils down to ethics and spreading the idea of ethics, how would you do that? What would be a recommendation to give to do that?
That is a great question, Dustin. And the answer is I don't know. I think it takes a lot of time. I do think it's been a while since I've taken like hunter's education, but somehow, I mean, it starts early in, I would say, the hunting, I don't know, the journey or when folks get into hunting. But I also think like there's a huge social media presence of like tagging big animals. Like no one wants to see like a 100-yard shot on a little forky. Everyone wants to see a big buck down or a big bull down or whatever it is, or a long shot. Like that's what is being like normalized, or I guess highlighted in a lot of ways. But I don't know how you go about trying to or getting ahead of like, we're doing this because we want to harvest meat for the fridge or for the year or whatever it is. How do you make that mainstream and get back to like the core ethical values or like what we consider what hunting should be or where we'd like it to be.
It's a tough one.
Station was really exciting. It drew everybody else in, or our group just got pushed back together.
Yes, everyone is rejoining.
Thanks for taking notes, Bryce.
Yeah, thank you
thanks
so
much.
much.
Yeah, I'll try and send these around, or at least make sure you read the meeting minutes and provide feedback.
Okay. We're going to go immediately. We don't have everybody. Do we have everyone back? Looks like we do.
Yes.
We're going to go immediately into a break to give Ellery time to reconfigure the groups. So I'm showing 8:01. Can we come back at 8:06? Ready to go into a new group?
Cool.
Thank you. Okay,
Ready
Well-
when you are, Wendy.
welcome back. We're gonna move right into a second conversation in small groups. So again, let's see, it's gonna be Alex, Jason, Jeff, and Tal, right?
Yes.
Okay, my audio was off. I'm sorry, Wendy. What'd you say?
I'm, you're fine. We're gonna go into our second question. And, Alex, Jason Top, Jeff Shin, and Tal Sampson will be staying here. Everyone else will get an invitation to a group, and you'll get 30 minutes again. So have a nice conversation.
And the question is, what ethics do you
Oh, yeah, sorry.
passed along to future generations of Idaho hunters?
Thank you for filling in the gaps, Celery.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Sorry, I was distracted with notes. All right, me, Tal, Jeff Shin.
Hey
Is there
guys,
3 of us? Oh, there's 4 of us.
four of us.
I just hopped back in. Am I in the main room?
Um,
Yeah, you're hanging out with the cool kids, Tim.
Tim, you should be, where is he supposed to be? Oh, no, where is Tim? Oh, group
You're
3.
lost.
He's about to lob me into another room. Sorry.
Yeah.
Bye, Tim.
You're stuck with us.
I feel like I'm in the right room, but
You
If
are,
you
Jason.
click on breakout rooms at the bottom, go to room 3. Group 3.
Wendy, I already added him to the room.
Oh, okay.
He's gone.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so is that everybody we're supposed to have here? Are we all sorted out?
So is there only 3 of us?
Four of us.
Oh, there we go.
Dylan, you should be,
So Dylan and Kevin should be in other groups, right?
I'm trying to find Dylan.
Herding cats.
Yeah, well, it's
Wendy,
not your fault, it's our fault.
Yeah, Wendy, the list you gave me looks
Yeah,
like.
he's missing Dylan, isn't he? Let's put him group 1.
Okay, 1 sec, Dylan.
See ya. Maybe.
Now, where's Kevin supposed to be?
That's a question I ask myself often.
Why did I come into this room?
I wasn't invited to go to a room, so I'm in limbo.
Wendy,
Yes.
you had Nicole Swafford and Doug Talbot listed twice, so I can
Oh,
put
no wonder, okay. So
2
let's
or
put,
4.
yeah. Let's put him in group 4.
Okay, so 1 second, sir. Sorry about this, gentlemen.
Yeah, I need to double check my lists.
Let's see, and we want to put Mr. Rogers
In group 4.
in group 4, which is group 9. Okay, you should get an invitation, sir.
Okay, there.
All right. Now I think we're finally to our group here. Anybody want to lead off? Who wants to take notes?
Alex is really good with notes.
No, I'm not.
I second the motion.
Okay, I'm just gonna write down whatever I want to say for you guys.
Great.
So
Great.
that's my notes.
Perfect.
I trust you.
All right, I'll take notes, I guess. You guys,
So
who wants to lead off?
is it just us 3?
It should be us 4. It should be Jason Top, Jeff Shin, you, and me. We're all here.
I can
see
only
Jason.
see one person.
So
There's Jason.
Jason,
I see
you're on a
Jason.
screen where you can only see whoever's talking, probably.
Oh,
you-
gotcha.
Okay, I got
So-
you. I got you.
We're all here. We're all here. We're good. Who wants to lead off? What ethics should be passed to future generations? What, in you guys' opinions? I'll try to write down everybody's responses as well as I can without going too crazy. Jeff, you're up.
What ethics? I would say respect is going to begin the big one. Respect for wildlife, respect for other hunters, and respect for the non-hunting public.
Yeah, I like that.
Right out of the Hunter's Ed
Love it.
manual.
Is it? It's been a
Yeah,
lot of
literally.
years since I
You
think I was
read
in
it?
Hunter's Ed before there was a manual.
You guys don't have to pause just because I'm writing.
I'll go. I'd like to teach my kids that distance matters, and that sometimes the game's got to win in order for us to even call this a sport. We've got, I mean, it's in our ancestry. We've hunted for years and years and years, and we got to make sure that when we sit down and talk about things like technology, that it's not. The assumption is what's good for us as hunters, and how effective, the efficacy in the field is obviously important. Quick, clean kills, things like that. But there's some things that I would. There's very few that I've seen as far as when I was younger and we had to go to hunter education and that was introduced to us, and things like not stepping over fences with loaded guns and being careful around, your hunter friends, with loaded guns and things like that. But there's not a lot that's talked about distance, and we really haven't had to have that discussion. A lot of people were hunting with 30-30s, and it wasn't that long ago, and very few people even had four-wheel drives, and now you got side-by-sides, and you got these modern hunting rifles, great bows, great muzzleloaders, and all those are good, and some have been beneficial to wildlife as far as the efficacy of them in the field. But there's not enough that we do as hunters that have hunted for a very long time to teach our peers, new hunters, young kids, that distance matters, and that the wildlife, it has to be able to it has to be able to use its defense mechanisms in order for us to call this hunting and a sport, or nobody's going to ever agree with what we do. And that's what I'd like to teach young hunters. Distance matters. And it was always taught to me is regardless whether I hunted waterfowl, whether I was hunting deer, whatever, my family really, it was a big risk. If I shot something over 300 yards, I was in a lot of trouble. I had to explain that to Dad. And so, and always had to go look for blood and do those types of things that they taught me. They were really good about teaching me those things. But I guess the most important thing was my grandpa always taught me that sometimes, or that the wildlife has to win. Sometimes they got to win.
Mm-hmm.
Can't get them all the time. So.
Yep. Jason, you want to take it from there, or you want me to go?
Yeah, I can throw some in there. I mean, I would say respecting other hunters. When I'm out in the field and I'm headed into a place that I'm wanting to hunt, and I get there at 3 o'clock in the morning, and somebody else beat me there. Well, they beat me there. So I turn around and go find a different place to hunt, and I find a lot of this anymore. You could be hiking in somewhere and people park right behind you and walk right in on your same hunt. And it just blows my mind that they do that. So with me passing on to generations, it's just finding ways to respect the other hunter as well. There's a lot of land out there. People can do this. There's a lot of country we can go hunt. And that kind of kills it for people. You need to be able to enjoy that and experience and get out there and do that. I try to go as far as I can away from people, but Idaho's a small state. It's not like Montana or Wyoming. We do have a lot of rugged areas, but you have a lot of people hunting those areas as well. So just respecting others out in the field, and then the game itself too. I'm a, I was kind of against the cameras that send the pictures to your cell phones. My son has one and he hunted one this year and had it set up and he'd seen a big buck on it. And that kid spent his entire hunting season every single day hiking 3 miles into this area where this deer had been. And then hiking back out in the dark, and he never did get that deer, and he did the entire season. So I don't really see where it really helped him out, other than it gave him a target buck, and rather than going out just find any specific deer that happened in front of him, he was hunting one deer. You know, and I thought that was pretty cool. Actually, made me kind of rethink it a little bit. Maybe they aren't that bad of a tool. I mean, that the pictures that he got, that deer never did come in at any specific time. You know, sometimes it'd be in there every 2 days, and it might be the fourth or fifth day. It just, you never knew when it was coming. You never knew what time it was coming. Most of the time it came at night because they're pretty nocturnal, but it was kind of interesting to watch him do that, you know. And to me, there's ethics that go along with that as well. You know, that kid truly did try to shoot one specific deer, and that's tough to do. So I thought that was neat. That's just a little story to throw out
That's all right. I think we have enough time for a little story.
there. Yeah, but go ahead.
Okay. For me, myself, I would say that probably the number one ethic beyond just fair chase ethics that we all know and love is I would like to pass on that hunting is personal. It's not a competition. You know, I think in our modern world where we can all see what everybody's doing all the time, it becomes such a competition. You know, everybody's out trying to make their YouTube channel make money. Everybody's competing for the same things. And I think that competition drives way more of the ethical dilemmas that we see today than even our technological advancements. Most people wouldn't go drop $5,000 on a thermal unless it was going to get them something. I'm not going to spend $5,000 on a thermal unless it gives me some advantage. I'm not going to do it because, you know, for me, I've hunted. I know we all had our introductions. I'm a traditional bow hunter. I hunt with a longbow. I hunt with a rifle too. I don't have anything against hunting with a rifle. But for me, it's personal. You know, it's when I go for hunt, I have my own reasons to go. When I'm hunting with my bow, it's because I'm embracing a challenge, and that's how I intend to do it. I don't care if I don't kill as many animals as the next guy because I haven't. I've punched 4 tags in my entire life, and you know, Tal's probably killed dozens more animals than I have.
No.
But
I'm way older. I'm way
but, you know,
older.
my well, that's not probably not way older, but a little older.
I've
But
still never harvested anything with the traditional bow. So if you've done that, you have all of my compliments
I
because
killed
that
4
would be tough.
tags. I killed my first one with a rifle this year. And that
Wow.
was I shot a deer with my rifle. It was my first deer ever. I shot it with a rifle, and I've been hunting for decades. And
I love
I
it.
did what
I
most
love
kids
it.
do at 10 or 11 years old, you know.
What a
But
privilege. Remember, 5%.
yeah.
5%. What
So
a privilege.
yeah, my whole take is I think the ethic that I would like to pass on is that hunting's a personal thing. It's an experience. It's not a competition. It's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
You know, that punch tag is great. The meat in the freezer is fantastic. But if you're hunting in such a way that you don't enjoy it yourself, you don't feel proud of how you did it, there's no reason to be doing it.
Yeah.
You know, we see every year. I don't know where you guys are at in the state as far as what you see, but here in the valley, we've got a lot of snow geese, and every year there's a pickup load of snow geese dumped somewhere in a dumpster in a ditch because these
That's
guys go
sad.
out and
Sad.
kill dozens of snow geese. Just say, "Oh yeah, we got a 5-man limit today," and they don't want to clean them. They just dump them in a ditch.
Yeah. Those are our
And
peers.
those are our peers. Yep. And that's the kind of mindset I think we need to get rid of because they're not doing it because they want the meat. They're not doing it for the sport. They're doing it for the
Yeah.
accolades.
Absolutely.
And I mean, that's not okay.
Yeah. I
Agreed.
like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that somehow, I mean, hunting obviously is centered around killing an animal. There's no escaping that, but there's so much more to it. And we are not a society that we're all starving and need to go out and fill every tag all the time to
Yeah.
survive. I mean, that's the reality.
Yeah.
This whole exercise we're going through is all about social science. It's not about biology. It's not about anything else right now. It's about the social norms, what's acceptable. And while the desire to want to go out and kill an animal is great, I think that bloodlust, and I think it gets maybe into that competition you're talking about, Alex, is that ruins it. I truly agree with that element is just something that if we can teach people that it is about the experience, it's about the hunt, the harvest is a bonus, really. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had some of the greatest days of my life elk hunting this last couple weeks, chasing elk with a muzzleloader, and I
Me too.
haven't filled the tag yet. And it's just like I have had so much fun having near misses and having a coyote run up my leg yesterday. I mean, it's just like I'm just having a great time, and that to me is worth a low odds hunt that I'm on right
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Me too.
So.
Me too.
Took me 5 years to get that guy, and I could not be more proud of that little raghorn.
Absolutely.
Was that a muzzleloader?
No, my longbow.
Rifle.
Wait.
Rifle.
Longbow.
Oh, dude. It's
Well,
awesome.
I'm learning to shoot a recurve right now, so I'm really trying to limit myself even further.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bear and the elk were both with the same longbow that I built. So
nice.
So there's a committee here in Pocatello, a mule deer committee, and they mentioned it. Tony did during our first group. But anyways, it's a 12 person group from our region, Southeast region, and they're talking about some really cool stuff like muzzleloader only hunts in a lot of our region. Our region has done really, really well, and they're trying to make things a little bit more difficult. They're talking about some traditional archery hunts, some longbow hunts,
that might
they're
be my
talking
fault.
about muzzleloader hunts. And so, those if people really knew the opportunity that you just talked about, Jeff, with a muzzleloader, I've harvested with my bow, and I've harvested and I've harvested with my muzzleloader, and I've harvested with my rifle. By far, my funnest, and I'm just going to disagree with you a little bit, Alex, on the archery, because I know you're going to say bow. But that muzzleloader, when you harvest, I've hunted for 40 years with a muzzleloader. When you harvest something with a muzzleloader, it's like no other. And I wish more people would kind of adopt that methodology and think of how many more opportunities we could have just because of shorter range. Make it a little bit more difficult, and you can put a lot more tags in a unit and give somebody the experiences that you experienced. And that's what I'd love to teach young hunters.
That's the whole basis for the muzzleloader and archery hunts is, lower success rate, higher opportunity.
Yeah,
And
there's a reason why they're doing it.
Well, and that's one of the reasons our charge is important, is to keep those a low success, high opportunity hunt, because
Absolutely.
Once they reach a high success rate to the point where there's no point in it, guess what? We're all down to one general weapon season, and it's going to be 2 weeks long.
And a lot more
My dog is
control.
fair.
Range of weapon is your success. So if you look at any state, range of weapon is the success. So once you start lowering that range, you can have a lot more. I wish, more states back east, just because of the areas, because of farming and trees and everything, they have to go to muzzleloaders, and those inline muzzleloaders. And Jeff, did you use the new bullets?
No, I'm still shooting. I got 54 caliber and shooting 525 grain.
Oh my God.
No excuses bullets, solid lead.
That's torture. The Fish and Game, when you can use an alloy now, it's really makes a difference in the kick, obviously in the kick, what goes out, because I was shooting a 600 grain bullet. And there's a lot of technology that does kind of help us. Technology is not all bad, just like they said. Those new bullets, you will find you'll spend a lot less time at the range than with that lead.
That's probably all right. I just got an awful lot of those lead ones I want to use up.
I like it. I like it. I like it. Yeah.
It was interesting though, because we were talking early on, and part of the whole premise of this is there's going to have to be a limitation somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's technology, whether it's tags, whether it's season length. And surprisingly, how many people in the public comments were willing to give up tags?
Yeah,
to keep the technology. And to me, that was just like, I'd rather hunt with a spear than every year than not get a chance to hunt for 5
Do
years.
you know that I think a little bit of that is education and going out there and hunting with a tool like you're using or a tool like you're using, Alex. Once they do that and you kind of get that harvest out of your mind, that you just get to get out there and participate, that's a pretty cool challenge, and it's lifelong. I haven't punched very many tags at all. I mean, as far in the last 10 years, I've been pretty lucky with my muzzleloader, but it's a challenge. Every year's a challenge. I just got done with my elk hunt, and it ended Saturday. I never harvested.
Yeah.
So it's part of the game.
I've had mule deer for 7 years with my bow. Still never killed one with my bow. I've been so close. I've been within range. I've even dropped the arrow a couple times, but when you're shooting a longbow, sometimes that deer's gone when the arrow gets there if they see you before you let go.
Yep. I love it.
But shooting at deer with a rifle this year, after spending so many years hunting with a longbow, it's not cheating. I'm not going to say it is. It's still fair chase, but
yeah,
it felt like cheating after being able to, after army crawling through sagebrush and picking where each individual digit goes when you're moving through the brush, to going, oh, there's a deer. It's at 80 yards. I don't even have to try to be sneaky.
Yeah.
And I mean, this was an extreme scenario here because it was private property. These were basically farm deer. They went to the same field every night to feed, and the farmer had a problem with them, so they asked me to kill one. So it was a depredation hunt, plain and simple. It wasn't, but it was like it was so backwards from everything I've done the last decade.
Yeah. Well, the skill set that you acquired by doing that, though, made you a much better hunter, regardless of what methodology you're using. Those skill sets are super, super important. But I read the comments too. I was also really surprised by that. And by talking to, it depends on the individual. If I talk to an individual that's really into that, because people that are younger than us grew up, playing games and doing all kinds of things. That's really important to them and part of their process. And I was a little surprised, but I don't know if they would really agree with it when you start looking at other states and seeing that it might take 15 years for you to go on a bull elk hunt in Utah,
Right.
as opposed to every year in Idaho. So it's easy to say that, but once you have to start choosing it, it might be better to pick up a tool that's a little bit more difficult, that lowers success rate, gives some of these a little bit of wildlife that's having some problems because of habitat and everything to come back a little bit. And then we can revisit some of that other stuff. But I think it is important what we're doing.
So I have a lot of friends in Oregon and Nevada. So Oregon's a point system, and a lot of them have been putting in for 20 years to get enough points to draw the tags they want to get. Nevada, you kill a bull elk, you have to wait 7 years, I believe it is.
Yeah.
You
And
cannot
good luck drawing it in 7 years.
Yeah. You can't draw another tag for 7 more years. If I think it's a cow, you have to wait 2 years.
Yeah.
We're so lucky to be in Idaho. We're lucky.
People don't. I think people who live here and they get upset with not drawing the tags they want year after year, or having, you have a hunt that you have high pressured animals. They don't appreciate the fact that they get to go out and hunt. And we're not the biggest trophy state out here. You're not going to kill a bull elk the size of an Arizona bull, as likely. You're not going to kill a 200-inch mule deer every year by any means,
or any year.
They are out there, though. They're out there. You have to work harder to find them. But the thing is, I can be out there looking for them every single year.
Opportunity.
And
I agree. Jason, what do you think?
I don't know. I've been pretty successful, so I've been trying to stay pretty quiet.
Jason's killing things left and right. He doesn't want to do anything.
Right? I've been a guide, you name it, and I have been one of the fortunate few to be pretty damn successful when it comes to elk hunting and deer hunting, mountain lion, bear. If it can be hunted or trapped, I do it. So I try to stay a little. A lot of people like that.
Yeah.
My son is too. This year, however, I never got a deer this year, but it wasn't because of opportunity. It was because of choice.
Good.
know, I took 2 weeks off and deer hunted the whole time, but I was looking for 160-inch whitetail and I never seen it. You know, I
Yeah.
seen people in the 140 range, 145-ish, but I just didn't want to stop hunting. So I never took one. I got 3 beef hanging in my shop right now, so it isn't like I was trying to go
They'll be
after
160
things.
next year.
Yeah,
So-
you know, that's just the way I go. You know, I've killed some big
Yeah.
stuff. You know,
Yeah.
Good on you.
bulls
Can I-
and
Can I jump back to our original question here really quick?
Mhm.
So our question and answer earlier, you especially Tal were asking about, what's the long distance and everything. So I teach hunters education, and we are not required to shoot anymore for hunters ed. We don't have to have any shooting for the class. I disagree with
heard
it, not my
that.
choice. But when I am able to do a class with a live shooting clinic, I love it because we can take the kids out, give them a 22, give them a target at 10 yards. And they're kids. Some of them is their first time ever handling a gun. Half of them can't hit the target the first few rounds, and they get it figured out eventually. And you say, okay, so you're having a hard time hitting this target at 10 yards. And we have a cutout of a bull elk 200 yards from the range there. And you point it and they go, okay, that's your average shot distance and your average target there. Do you think you could hit that? Oh, no, absolutely not. I'm like, okay, keep that in mind. And then, you go through that, okay, take this target. When you can hit it every time, move it out another 10 yards. When you can hit it every time, move it out another 10 yards. It's like, that's the kind
I
of
like that.
that's the kind of mentorship we need in the hunting community. But I
It
think
is.
that competition that we have, that we were talking about earlier, I think prevents a lot of that because people don't want to share.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Sorry, I
I
didn't mean
love
to.
that. What
get
why
back in
is
soapbox.
what is the reasoning behind the because this is about the third time I've heard this, that they don't require, it's almost like taking a written driver's license test exam,
With no
and you don't
skills
have to
test.
do you don't have to go out and drive the vehicle. I mean, that
I-
seems odd to me.
I'm not 100% of the reasoning, but I kind of think it might have had something to do with the lack of instructors and places to shoot. Because
Well-
even with, like, here in Boise, we have Blacks Creek Range, which is owned by Fish and Game, and there's a hunters education range on the range that's specifically set aside for hunters education. But when I go to schedule a class, there's sometimes I have to fight 3 other classes, not even hunters
Wow.
ed,
Wow.
to get that range. And I'm like, okay, the whole purpose of this is for hunter safety.
Yeah.
And I have to struggle to get on the schedule in order to use it.
didn't that
Well,
come about with COVID?
It might have, Jason. I'm not sure. I only started teaching hunters ed after COVID because a lot of the older guys that we're teaching quit during COVID, either
Yeah.
for their own fears or because they didn't want to deal with the restrictions.
That's a
I feel
good
like
theory.
there was a lot of kids that wanted to take classes that couldn't because they didn't have in-person classes, and that's why they went to online.
Did you have something to add there, Hillary?
Reading was for the
I was
code.
just going to say, I don't have the answer, but I can get the answer and provide it to you folks.
Yeah, that's something
That'd be
that,
nice.
I mean, even getting the discussion going and getting people talking about these are great ideas, to get people at least from, because we all have different points of view, but if you can't sit your new hunters down and your group of hunters and and educate them on this, you didn't even have to have any restrictions. I'm just saying objectively, just go out there, teach them, that, these finer points that we had to do back when I was younger. That was a long time ago. We had to do hunter's ed. We had to do hunter's ed.
Well,
20
yeah,
some years ago for me. But
right. Well, we still obviously require hunters ed to hunt.
Yeah.
But the shooting portion, I'm not sure why, but I can get that information. And just so you are all aware, you have about a minute before folks are going to start joining back in. So also feel free when we go over those comments to mention that in front of the whole group.
Okay. One thing that I wanted to add to that, what was it? Hold on, brain fart.
You're getting old.
So I personally, I don't really feel like anything our group is working on should be tackling long distance shooting necessarily.
I agree.
I feel like that's an ethical dilemma, not a technological dilemma.
I agree.
I think no matter the technology, long range shooting is going to happen. It's People are going to take longer shots than they should. That to me, that is ethical. That's mentoring. That's not technology. That's just my personal opinion.
I
But
agree, and I think that whole education piece is critical on that because you can't regulate ethics. I mean, because ethics go beyond what's legal, and we can't, and that's something I don't think we can mandate. But I do think somehow, as a hunting society, we need to educate people on the pitfalls of some of the new trends. I mean,
yeah,
some people are great, but it's important.
yeah. I mean, the long distance shooting thing was one of. I mean, that's one of the top things we've received comments on.
Agree.
But I think that's not our task to tackle.
I agree.
Hey, looks like everybody else is coming back now. I should shut up.
Just a reminder to put your notes together and make sure to send them to Wendy and I.
Got a couple groups still hanging on.
5 seconds.
Numbers are going up fast. Well, welcome back, everyone. We now have about 20 minutes, so we wanted to give you the opportunity to just share kind of key takeaways from those two conversations that feel worthy of being said in the group as a whole. And we can try just opening mics and talking.
One thing that I noticed this evening that caught me kind of odd was every time that we bring up hunting with technology, we're talking about modern muzzleloaders, we're talking about turret rifle scopes, we're talking about rifles. And it dawned on me this afternoon talking to my buddies, but the amount of people that I talk to that are shooting animals with their bows at like 80 yards. And it didn't dawn on me until the Pope and Young guy started talking about and showing the difference between crossbows and how their success rate has crawled up. And it got me thinking comparatively to even a 2017 bow compared to one of the 2014 bows. The speed and the velocity that you're getting out of that allows that to get shot very, very fast, still keep that kinetic energy at distance. So you're still making a ethical, clean kill with a bow. But it seems like we're all tied up on this rifle hunt and this muzzleloader hunt idea. And I think that the archery aspect of it, other than just crossbows, is being overlooked a little bit.
Other thoughts you want to contribute?
From all the meetings that I have seen that we've been in from these two meetings from tonight, a lot of it is based on respecting the animal. A lot of people, a lot of hunters are all in agreement pretty much of respecting the animal. If you don't respect the animal, then what's the point of hunting?
So adding on to that from our group discussion, most of our group was respect for wildlife was very clear. My personal opinion on ethics we should be passing on is that hunting is not a competition. That once it becomes a competition rather than a personal journey or a personal challenge, that's when the respect for the animals and respect for other hunters goes out the door.
Yeah, both groups that I participated in, we at least part of the discussion was around, the values and how do we instill values and work on how people look at different things and behave. And I think we all agreed that needs to be one of our charges or one of our outcomes here is the educational process, because we can regulate all we want, but you can't force it on people to make good choices. But if through education and that ethical development, perhaps that could make a difference.
I'll agree with that with the education piece. I know the last group I was in, we were talking about education. They go over ethics some in the hunter safety, but they don't go over like say the ballistics. That goes back to the bow hunting even. The understanding of how it's going to hemorrhage an animal, how it's going to do the hydrostatic shock on an animal with bullet impact, or whether it's an arrow. I think that needs to be brought into some of the education for people to make right decisions. You can't just believe whatever you see on the internet or what's on the box or a hunting show. You actually have to have real world data on that to make that educated decision on that shot or releasing that arrow.
I'm going to hop on in. Can you guys hear me? Am I unmuted?
You are.
Great. I just want to kind of harken back to Justin's presentation earlier in the evening. And a lot of what we've discussed tonight, a lot about ethics, what does hunting mean to us, has been very important. But he came up with something that's the best I've ever seen it put. Out of all the people I talk to, we all feel the same way. And there's a lot of folks in this, I can hear it in this group. There's a palpable fear of going too far, making our voices heard, taking that step and making a change. If we do not attack some of these subjects, and we don't recommend some changes that they're able to be implemented, we are going to leave the fishing game basically with their hands tied. And what is going to happen is instead of changing things here or there, thermals, long range, whatever, they're basically just going to regulate us out of tags and out of the amount of time we can hunt. If we don't put some regulation on some of these things, our children are not going to be able to hunt an elk every year. It's going to be every 5 or 10 years. That's really the only avenue we're going to leave the fishing game to be able to regulate this. So we need to take it upon ourselves to see how serious this is. If we want the future generations to experience Idaho like we did as children, we have to make that step. We have to do this. It is about our children. And because the alternative is Arizona, where people get 2 tags in a lifetime, is Wyoming, where you get a tag every 6 or 7 years. And that's not what we love. We love Idaho because we get to be out in nature. Our children get to be out in nature, experiencing what we did. I mean, that is distinct in our last meeting. That's what we love about this state. If we want to keep it, we got to be bold a little bit. And I'm a freedom lover. I don't want the government in my business. I don't want people telling me what I can and can't do, but the alternative is very dreary and gray. And I refuse to sit back and just let that happen to my son.
Al has his hand up.
You're muted, Tal.
Okay, sorry. I'm still trying to figure this thing out. Hey, Larry, I completely agree. I'm really concerned. Technology has gone a long ways and there has to be some restrictions. We've all dealt with it. I've hunted with all different weapons and there's restrictions on all different weapons. As far as the thermals and things like that, there's some no-brainers in there that we have to do, The other stuff's a lot tougher, but there has to be some restrictions because this technology is just going to get better tomorrow. So we can easily just think that this is going to continue. But the one thing I've learned about wildlife and hunting is they go up in cycles, and technology has really kind of changed the game. So I completely agree with Larry.
Matt?
Yeah, I think it was Ken or a minute ago was talking about, education and a campaign like we went over, I think it was Arizona was doing I Am Ethical or whatever. I think the department can sure put out some social media teaching ethics that way. We just watched Colorado go through that lawsuit on lions and bobcat ban, and their social media presence really helped influence those people in Colorado. That 78% that we heard about today, 75% or whatever it was, 78%. I think we can influence a lot with social media out in the online, and that can go a long ways with a lot. I mean, what is a long range shot? Like, Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young was talking about. It's different from every hunter. It's hard for me to restrict something from another guy that I don't do, but I want to keep mine, and so I think with that, as we're going through the process, but I think there's a lot to be said on a social media campaign on ethics. Thanks.
Hallie?
My comment was close to Matt's, but just we talked, in our last group about, the hunter's education classes and how they are structured now. I just went through hunter's education with my daughter, and there wasn't a class, nearby, and so we did it online. And there's some things that could be improved with that to emphasize ethics and respecting the animal. There's a lot of stuff on there that is way over a kid's head. It's not built for a kid, that class, the online class. So there's some things that might be able to be changed there to emphasize ethics and respecting the animal in those hunter's ed classes. There's kids that take hunter's ed that their parents taught them wrong, and that's your chance to get in front of them and teach them something else. And so I think it'd be helpful if we could get those classes a little bit more beefed up in that area. So.
Hey, Jason Carr?
Thank you, Wendy. So I think there are some, I guess I would call them low-hanging fruit items that are pretty, I think we could agree on. I feel like I could agree on. I really liked the presentation from the guy in Utah when they talked about moratoriums on trail cameras, from August 15th until December or whatever, no trail cameras in the woods, especially those. A lot of Idaho, you can get away from cell phone service, so you're not getting that instant feedback on your camera. But that would be an easy one to do, and I don't know that I don't have trail cameras, so it wouldn't personally affect me. So I'm on board with it, I guess. And then there are definitely some things that we talked about in our group earlier tonight. Maybe we don't want to regulate long range shooting, but maybe we regulate the power of scope that you can have on a gun. Just like actually in Idaho, they don't limit the magazine capacity, but for hunting rifles, but they I don't know if they do for shotguns when you're out foul, water bird hunting or not, because I'm not a bird hunter. So I think there are some easy things we can do. There are some, we could, and again, our charge here is to make recommendations. So if we recommend more social media presence, maybe that's how one of our recommendations. If we recommend other things, I guess we'll just have more discussions about that. But so far, the discussions have been great, and I appreciate everyone's input. And I will lower my hand and let someone else go.
Thank you. Alex Martin?
I just want to bounce back to Hallie's comment about the hunter's education. I've talked to a lot of people in this group so far that would be great instructors. You guys should volunteer. We're struggling. There's not enough of us. It's hard enough to keep classes going in the Boise area. There's a lot of people here. There's 1 million people in this valley and only about 40 hunter's ed instructors. So if you can, volunteer.
Hallie?
I just wanted to throw out there too that, I think one of the things that we have an opportunity to do is to simplify and reword some of the things that are already in regulation. There's things in the regulation that are contradicting each other and making it hard for Fish and Game to prosecute. One in particular is on drones. There's some conflicting language in there. So that's one thing to keep in mind is, of course, we can add and improve, but we can also just, rework some of what's already there to make it easier to enforce, because a lot of these things that we're hearing about are already illegal. Whether they're using new technologies, the things they're doing are already illegal in the law. It's just kind of some rewording that might make that easier to enforce.
Thank you. We have a few more minutes if anybody wants to contribute any thinking, reflecting on what you talked about in your groups.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in real quick. I mentioned it in a couple of the breakouts, but reading through the public comments, it struck me how many people indicated that they'd be willing to see fewer tags. And that was something that, when we started this whole conversation in Boise, almost to a T throughout the room, one of the things we appreciated most about Idaho was the opportunity to hunt every year. And we were, given this task to look at different options, one being reduced tags, one being reduced seasons, one being reducing the technology. And so this being a purely social exercise, trying to see what the values of people are, that to me threw a little bit of the wrench in my thinking that there are people that want to keep the technology more potentially than the opportunities. So I go back to what Larry said earlier about wanting to keep our opportunities. And so my bent would be probably the other way. I want to make sure we maintain those opportunities, but we're going to have some hard choices, and we're going to have to make some solid recommendations. So anyway, it was just interesting to get that feedback from the public.
And
Jeff, I will jump in here real quick. Sorry, Kenneth, I apologize. So I was getting my teeth cleaned, and I talked to my dentist about and he's an avid archery hunter. And one of the things he asked me to advocate for were these range finding sights on your bow. And I was like, well, he's like, things happen really fast out there. And so if you have this range finding sight, then it makes, you don't have to grab your rangefinder. And I'm like, well, but those are the kinds of ethical things we're talking about. Is that ethical? Is it fair chase? All the stuff, right? So I agree with, like, yeah, do we want to limit the opportunities, or do we want to limit the technologies? So thank you.
Ken, Crane?
Yeah, a little smart alecky comment to begin with, but he could also develop his skills at just estimating range with practice and to deal with those quick and dirty.
Yes, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah. So I guess it's not so much a comment as a question, of next steps, and we've done a lot of learning, and our next one's the January meeting. At some point we're going to have to start prioritizing and developing a path forward of what we're actually going to try to develop and put forward to the commission. Ellery, when are we going to start on that process?
I am happy to take this question unless Wendy, you want to take it, and I can add. Up to you, ma'am.
Well, the next meeting will be in person, and it'll provide a really important opportunity, because you haven't been together in a while, to start thinking together. And I don't want to get the cart in front of the horse by telling you what you need to do when you're working together. I'll pose questions again for your consideration together. I would not be able to predict accurately how long it will take for you to do your work. We're just going to try to make the maximum use of your time together. So we just have about a minute or two more. We've got 2 more hands up.
Wendy, can I add real quick to that? Tomorrow at 10 a.m., Fish and Game is sending out a survey to roughly 15,000 Idaho hunters that's asking some of these basic questions about hunting technology and fair chase and where they think of that, and what they think of all of that. The results of that survey will be presented to you at the January meeting, which, to your question, I think my hope is the way we design the survey, and our goals for the information that we will be receiving or the type of information that we will be receiving, is that will provide you hopefully some good idea of where the public is at on a variety of these different technologies to help you prioritize your discussion. That, along with the public feedback that you've been getting, that we'll be summarizing and continuing to provide, I think will layer nicely to be able to say, okay, of all the technologies being discussed, these are the top ticket items that across Idaho hunters are talking about. And hopefully that will help inform your discussions moving forward.
So Kevin Rogers. And then
Yeah,
Matt.
thank you. The one technology elephant in the room that we don't seem to be talking much about, and it's something that I think we need to bring back into the conversation. The biggest change in technology that I've observed in my 35 years of hunting Idaho is improvements in transportation to access backcountry, which has had a massive impact, I think, on wildlife security. And I'm talking four-wheelers, I'm talking electric bicycles, I'm talking side-by-sides, razors, you name it. Those are technologies, whether we want to, I know they seem to be viewed differently, but those are definitely changes. You know, it's no longer just your boots and your horseshoes. It's all those other things.
Yeah.
And to me, we need to somehow weave that back into our conversation because I think it matters.
So Matt Borg and then Hallie, 1 minute each.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Hillary that question on that survey, but just one comment is I had about 30 calls this week on cameras. A lot of them were youth concerned about losing their trail cameras. And so that's just a thought on that, you know, just a lot of youth commenting on it. I don't know. I encouraged them to get online and leave those comments, but I don't know on them. Some of them, I don't even know if they have emails. So, but anyway, youth like trail cameras.
And Hallie, last word.
I was just gonna ask if we are still gonna be receiving from Fish and Game any data on hunter success rates, or that's something we talked about last time.
Yes, so in the next meeting, we will also be having, in addition to information about the survey results, we will also be having a presentation from Toby, who will talk about success rates over time, as well as just kind of a general background information of just how we manage wildlife populations, kind of going a little bit more detail on the things that Justin touched on about season timing and length and kind of all the different factors that go into why things are the way that they are now and all the different considerations that impact harvest success and why they are the way they are, in addition to trends, harvest trend data. And then we'll also be hearing from Officer Wooten about kind of more nuanced about enforcement concerns and capabilities and all that also at the next meeting.
So the last slide has a review of what we're going to talk about at the next meeting, with most of which Ellery just said. But I wanted just to make sure that we understand what the rest of your schedule looks like. So January 4th will be in person, then there will be 4 online meetings again, with the final meeting being in person. Reminder that that's on March 22nd to get in front of the Fish and Game meeting. That's the 25th and 26th. So, this is what we've designed the next agenda to address. There's been a suggestion several times that you wanted to talk about which technologies you were focusing on, but then we'll move to a broader conversation about what you think you want to recommend going forward. And like I said, it'll just be, basically, we're turning it back to you pretty soon to haggle out your differences of opinion and hopefully find agreement around what you want to recommend together. So that is our time. Thank you so much for your time and attention tonight. And those of you that were assigned responsibility for taking notes, please send those on to me and to Ellery so that we can get them recorded in the meeting documentation. You can expect to get a draft group memory from me shortly. Between now and then, a lot of you celebrate holidays, including Christmas or otherwise. So I wish you the best. and look forward to seeing you in the new year.
Thank you everyone for your time and effort. It's very much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. See you in
Thanks.
January.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.